Wait, I think it's doing something else. 1 second. It says setting up your webinar for Facebook Live.
Okay.
Redirecting to Facebook Live. Okay, it looks like we're on. It says Flip the Script Stories is live now.
All right, you're on.
Perfect. All right. Thank you guys so much for your patience and welcome to the first ever Canadian Day of Empathy event. We are celebrating the 4th annual Day of Empathy event, and this has happened for the last few years in the United States. So I am deeply, deeply honored to be able to host and organize this event for us on this side of the border. The day is going to be great. It's full of people who've been impacted by the system, whether they've committed a crime, whether they've had crime committed to them, and as well organizations. And you'll hear from Senator Kim Pate as well in terms of what we're doing to advance things in the criminal justice reform area in Canada. So it's gonna be super excited. So just so you know, this is all being recorded. If you have a question throughout the day, feel free at the Q&A and the chat at the bottom. Just move your mouse around underneath your screen and you should see it pop up. And if you have any questions, I do have Erin who can be supporting on that side. I want to give a shout out to the Cut 50 team. They have a main event that's happening in the States today, particularly at 3 o'clock online. So 3 o'clock, I mean, I wish I could join in as well, but 3 o'clock, they're going to be hosting something with Van Jones, who is the founder of this, Jessica Jackson, Martin Luther King III, Lewis Reed, and a few others. So I'm sure it's going to be great. And what else is there here? If you did want to email me, I'm going to just share it now. The email for me is share@flipthescriptstories.com. So stories plural, share@flipthescriptstories.com. And I just want to make sure, 1 second here. Okay, perfect. And let me see, I have all my notes. I've been dealing with all this tech stuff, and then here we are. So I'm going to share a little bit about myself as well soon, and then I'll be sharing some more at 3:30. So today we have at 1:30 p.m. we have Marley Liss, who's coming on. Marley is someone who she was raped by somebody, and instead of pushing for his incarceration, she really wanted him to get healing, and so she did an 8-hour healing circle with him, and it's pretty cool. It's a really powerful story, and now she founded the Rehumanize movement because of it, and is pushing for restorative justice here in Canada. 2 o'clock, we have Emily O'Brien. Emily was convicted of being a drug mule, and I believe she's still in house arrest right now. She's going to be joining us. And Emily started a popcorn company, which I believe now she expanded into a full-on snack company while she was incarcerated here, which is pretty cool. And then 2:30, we have Laurie Lazar. Laurie is the only American on today, and she's on because Laurie is the founder and co-founder and executive director of Authentic Relating International. And they've been doing some neat stuff over there inside of Colorado prisons and have had a lot of great success. And they've been wanting to do some things on this side of the border, and we'll talk about that. At 3 o'clock, we have Nico Sofianos. Nico's going to be joining us. He's one of the Toronto musical artists that has dedicated a music video called Power in honor of Day of Empathy. It was really cold that day, but we got to get it done. So you'll see that at 3 o'clock. It'll be the first release, and that'll also support our organization, which I will speak about soon. At 3:30, I'll be sharing about my experience getting married in prison, my experience building a relationship behind bars, and what people can do if they have loved ones who are incarcerated, and what you can do to lower stress if you have loved ones that are incarcerated. At 4 o'clock, we have Senator Kim Pate. Kim is a huge advocate for criminal justice reform and universal basic income. In particular, her focus is on Indigenous women's issues in Canada. So we're really honored to have Kim here with us today. And then at 4:45, we have Greg McInnes, who's representing the Salvation Army. And they've had a long history with their presence in and out of prisons and jails throughout Canada and the States. So it'd be great to hear from him as well. We're going to have a short break after that. And then 7 o'clock, we have Brian Saund. Brian was incarcerated a couple of times back in the UK. He now lives in Canada, and he'll be sharing his transformation and the spiritual path that he's now on, and how he flipped everything around, how he flipped the script, and how it's impacted him still after all these years, because that happened back when he was a youth. And now he's a lot older. And then at 8 o'clock, we have Dennis. Oh, in between, we'll have a Q&A. So if you're listening and you might have questions throughout the day for any of the guests or any topics, that will be a bigger opportunity to do so. We can even bring you on live. And then at 8 o'clock, we have Dennis. And I'm not going to say his last name because I'm not sure how it's pronounced. I'm not going to attempt that. So Dennis was incarcerated at 16, and he was locked up in a federal penitentiary in Canada. Technically, you should be 18 years old. He was in there at 16 years old for 10 years and just won a lawsuit against the government and won. And so again, him too, like Brian, he found a spiritual path and transformed his whole life. And it's an honor to have him as well. So I'm so excited about the day. And, leading up to this event this morning, I was blowing my hair and, drying it. And I was like, this is really refreshing to have an event and to have a community, have a day that speaks about those who are impacted, speaks to those and for those who've been incarcerated, without villainizing them and without making them wrong and like they're the scum of the earth. And I can't tell you how many times over the years I've shared my story, or I go on, could be a YouTube video sharing about someone who's committed a crime. And I see all of these comments of, how just leave them in jail. They deserve it. What a wasted piece of skin. And, it goes on and on and on. And it's heartbreaking to hear it. I get it. I get why society would say those things. And at the same time, we're in 2020. What does it look like to move forward and lead with love and compassion? It's time. And so when we look at this, I even hesitate to call it the system, but we are going to call it the system. There's so many gaps and so many things that are not working today. And, I'm in one of the local jails every week, and some of the stories I hear, like dignity issues, such as, one underwear per month, or one guy saying, I've been here for 5 months and my bed sheets have been changed one time. In the States, women being shackled to the bed giving birth. One woman, she tripped over, she fell, she lost her baby. And then people brushing off their hands like, oh, well, it's not our problem. So a lot of dignity issues. And that's why I believe that stories are so important, because by sharing our experiences and the experiences of others, we get to hear what's happening. I don't know if you have watched the Joker movie. I hear mixed reviews, and Joker I thought was a brilliant movie. And, you might not agree with what the Joker did in killing people. However, you can have compassion, you can have empathy for how he got to that level of madness. And it's no excuse for murdering somebody. It's not letting him go off easy. However, in that storytelling, you can feel for him. And, that's why I'm so passionate about Flip the Script. So I have another 10 minutes before Marley comes on here. So I'm going to share how I got into this. So at 15 years old, I got involved with gangs. I started associating with gang members out in Alberta. I wasn't directly involved with them, like I wasn't a gang member. However, I hung around them a lot. That became my life. And 15 was the first time that I had left home. It was the first time I got into drugs. The first time for me for alcohol was 14. sex, 15. And I thought it was cool. And for me, I was raised in a really, really good home. So there was no, and I share this because people say, oh yeah, of course you're from a single parent home. And no, I have both my parents, they're still married. There was no financial stress. There was no physical abuse. There was no substance abuse, nothing. I was simply bored and I wanted more excitement. So I was hanging out with these guys. And then at 16, I was gang raped by multiple guys who were involved with the gangs. And at 17, I met a guy who was a gang leader. And I didn't know it at the time when I met him. I found out afterwards. And, you know, that was at 17. And that was the second time I left home and left home for good. And we built our relationship, which I'll talk about more later. We built a relationship. Pretty much, he was incarcerated 2 weeks after we met. And for me, it was really tough trying to learn how to cope with things in that lifestyle. And got married. I was 18. I married him in a federal penitentiary. And I got the experience, even though it was very painful, I got the experience of seeing people. I share this now, like some of the most brilliant minds that I know are incarcerated. And I remember going to see my husband inside and hear from some of these guys and see the talent, like through their art, for example, mind blown, absolutely mind blown. And I remember going, wow, there is so much talent behind prison walls, but yet these guys don't have an opportunity to show this. And I see so many guys that are hurt. I've had I've been blessed to be able to work with men over the years, and so many men have held so much emotional pain inside, and they haven't had that platform to share it. So flip the script. I'll come back to that. At 18, we got married. It was an abusive relationship. We had a lot of great times, and then he tried to kill me in 2010. So this May would mark 10 years since the attack. I never blamed him for it. I moved on and forgave him. I believe forgiveness is a big thing for ourselves and for other people. And he passed away, so he's no longer here. But through that experience, like I went to the funeral, and I also forgave the guy who instigated the gang rape, and I forgave a guy who held up a gun to me for not having sex with him when I was younger. That experience allowed me to share my story more and more and more over the years. And I did a TEDx talk in December 2018, and it was powerful. And at the same time, because TED has rules, I couldn't share the story how I wanted to share it. And so I sat back going, okay, I'm going to do the TEDx talk. And I feel like there's other people that are not professional speakers, and they don't want to be, but they have powerful stories breathing inside of them. And they know that it can make a difference for other people. So I was like, why not just put this idea together and create a story sharing community? I don't know where this is going to go. And so I gathered a few people that I knew in the Toronto area. Name came to me, flipped the script. All right, let's do this. Did that February 13th, 2019. At the end of the night, asked people, 25 people showed up. It was a storm, winter storm. Asked people who wants this to continue. All hands went up. And so that was the start of something that I didn't know would expand to what it has expanded to today. And now we have an 8-week program that we deliver to guys who have criminal histories, have drug addiction histories, and again, specifically men, because I was called to work with men, and give them that platform to flip the narrative on their stories, come from a place of responsibility, and appreciate all of their adversity that they've been through, and see that gift in the pain, and see how that's an opportunity for them to grow and now help other people. Because when they can clear that past, now they can create with a blank new canvas and create something new for themselves and live on purpose. So it's been an amazing, amazing journey to have these men flourish, and to see the change in their face, like physically change, and to hear the testimonials, and to hear these guys say, this program needs to be in every prison. Like, I can't even tell you, I don't have words for it. Even if I did all of this, even if I had to go through the experience I went through, to hear that it transformed even one guy's life, even though I know that it's transformed many already, it has been so worth it. And so I believe in second chances, and so does the Cut 50 network, the team, many of the criminal justice reform advocates out there right now. We believe in second chances. And if you haven't heard already, listen to or watch Scott Budnick's movie, Just Mercy. That was a really great movie. And it shows an example of things that are happening in the States and in Canada, I mean, and other places of the world. In fact, just I think it was 2 weeks ago, Alabama had executed a man who was innocent. He was on death row. So this kind of stuff is still going on. And a reminder to those who are listening, who are passionate about criminal justice reform and are advocates and are doing things. Number one, I honor you. I am deeply honored to be in partnership with you in doing this. And it's a reminder that we might not see the full needle shift in our lifetime, but to know that every grain of rice that we're adding to the scale is all adding up. And, you know, it's like 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you know, or even say before the car came along, no one even imagined a hunk of metal put together on wheels moving people along. But it slowly shifted. The needle kept going, and then bang, you had the car. So again, we might not see what we want to see in this lifetime, but just know that you are playing a huge role and helping move consciousness forward, elevating consciousness and moving humanity forward. And for that, I honor you. So I know that we have Marley that we're going to bring on. I just want to make sure that I have everything here. Yes, and by the way, guys, in Canada, incarceration is still, there are still a lot of issues that we're dealing with. And in the US, I just want to acknowledge that they incarcerate the most people in the entire world. It's something like 2.3 million people are incarcerated. And I can't even tell you how many more are already released. They're on probation, they're on parole. So this is an issue that impacts so many, not just for them directly, but family members, loved ones, children. So this touches so many, even the economy, right? Like when people who are incarcerated are released and they don't get the opportunity to get a job, that's actually an impact on the economy. So I'm excited to get this day forward. Erin, if you want to bring Marley on, that would be awesome. Or if Marley, if you want to turn on your camera and your microphone, that'd be great. There you are. Hello.
Hi, love. So
How
good
are
to
you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to be a part of this, and I'm happy to see all these amazing books behind you.
I know somebody asked if it was intentional, but it's not. I'm actually sitting in front of my husband's desk because my desk doesn't have enough light, but it's great because it has the power of now and conversations with God and seed of the soul and these great books that have played, I know, a big role for me in my transformation. So number one, thank you for being on. I appreciate you so much. And it's been great because you and I, both our organizations, myself with Flip the Script, you with Rehumanize movement, we are the first Canadian partners of Cut 50, and it's been an honor to be a part of this. And I'm excited to work with you going forward, you know, in this arena, and particularly with restorative justice options. And so I had mentioned about you earlier. I don't know if you had tuned in right from the beginning, but I shared a little bit about your story and how you pushed for restorative justice and a healing circle instead of having the guy who raped you go to jail and go to prison. And I feel like most people in society would be like, what? Like, why would you do this? Right. And I know that you said you got a lot of flack for this. So if we can start there, if you can share your experience of having a crime happen to you, and then we'll go into what you created afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for making empathy less controversial.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, so I was raped by a stranger in 2016. I did not know this human at all, and it was a very violent rape. Um, I had had non-consensual experiences before, but I think I denied them to myself, and this one was undeniable. So I think a really key moment, pretty much like hours after that happened, is my decision to report or not. And this is why I'm so passionate about talking about this, because when it came to that moment where I went to the hospital, I did a rape kit, which was horrible. They basically said, do you want to report or not? And that essentially meant, do you want to go down this punitive route with like years of trial or nothing? And I didn't want nothing. So I said, sure. But I really, really wish that I had been given the option of restorative justice right away. And yeah, I'll definitely share more about my why behind that.
So you were there after getting treated and you had no other option. It was like, you want to press charges? And obviously the common route is he goes to court, he gets convicted, he gets hauled off to prison. So when did you find out that there was actually a different option?
It took a long time. And this is why I created Rehumanize, because it took way too long. Like I went through the punitive system for 3 years. It was 2 years after the rape that I went to preliminary trial. And in those 2 years, I really was solely focusing on surviving. I was not really thinking about what I wanted to happen to him. I was like, I just need to get through each day. It was such a time of intense healing for me.
Of course.
And I just, I honestly, because I had no idea there was another option, I never thought about what justice could look like outside of this punitive structure. But I would tell friends from the beginning, like, if this was Marley's world, if this was my world, I would just want to sit down with him, like face to face, have him witness my grief, have him take accountability, hear him apologize, and for me to like ask the questions I needed to and say what I needed to say. But I did not know that was actually an option. I thought it was like quite delusional. And it wasn't until I got subpoenaed for the criminal trial just about a year ago, actually, that I was like, you know what? I'm ready to drop the charges. Court is horrible for me. And I don't necessarily believe that this will create change in the long run. I think if it's a win and he is convicted, he will probably just build more shame and isolation and likely come out more violent. You know, we know recidivism is so common. Yeah. I wanted him to heal. Like I wanted him to change so that this wouldn't happen again. So basically I was about to drop the charges, and then I said my dream vision to a sister one more time. I was like, you know, again, if this was my world, and she said, so make it happen. And I had never ever thought about taking action on this. I thought it was so naive and like out there. But when she said that, I was like, what do I have to lose? So that's kind of when I started looking into options. That's when I came across restorative justice and basically called like a surprise meeting with the prosecutor to present that.
Very cool. When I hear that, it reminds me of Gandhi saying about be the change that you want to see in the world, right? Because for you, it's like, that's delusional. That's a little bit of a crazy idea. That's not what I've been presented, but in my world, that's what I would love to see. And then by you pursuing that path, you found that, well, you actually not even found, you created that option. Like you went to the prosecutor and said, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And what was her reaction?
Yeah. I love that you say that, because that was such a big motive for me, like being the change. Like I was so devastated with what I had experienced that I got to a point where I was suicidal. And this to me made so much sense, because it's like, I don't want to live in a world where we're dehumanizing each other. So why don't I be a trailblazer in creating the world that I do want to be a part of? So that was such drive for me. And yeah, when I presented this, the prosecutor was so caught up in the traditional punitive system. I mean, I'm sure she's been fed like whatever, these conventional ideas her whole career and really believes she's helping people, but her reaction was like, oh, sweetie, you want restorative justice? Don't you understand that rape is bad? And I was like, it was a really, like, can I say badass? It was a really,
Yeah, of course.
it was a really badass moment for me, because I was like, yes, I understand that rape is so bad that we need to try something different because what we're doing isn't working. Like sexual violence, the rates have not decreased. We've seen no evidence that shows that acquittals or conviction have helped to lower rates of sexual violence, whereas with restorative justice, there's been so many stories of transformation, and it is possible. So essentially what happened is that another woman in the system, another Crown attorney, was like an amazing ally for me. She's now on our board of directors for Rehumanize. She's incredible. And she really fought for me. And a really important thing too, what the prosecutor who was not down for this said was, you know, with the Me Too movement, people want to see rapists locked up for a longer amount of time. And my response was, so you're using the Me Too movement to silence a survivor's voice? Like, I don't think that's the point. It's not. Yeah.
Wow. And so you said about, so what did the healing circle look like? So when you finally got to this option, got to sit, and was it directly in front of him? What did it look like? You were in a room with him?
Yeah. I want to say too that even before this circle happened, when I got the call saying you're getting what you wanted, restorative justice is happening, your assailant starting therapy, that's one of the most precious moments of my life, because that was the moment where I said, oh, wow, I am living in the world that I want to live in. I am being the change, and it's like rippling, and my voice is being heard for the first time since this rape happened. And that was so amazing. And to know that he was getting help and healing was so important. So when we actually met, it was maybe 6 months after him doing therapy, and it was a circle, a community-oriented circle. So restorative justice has roots in Indigenous and Jewish and Mennonite cultures. So there's this like community awareness that trauma impacts more than just the person who is like the victim perpetrator. It's like it ripples. So my mom and my sister were there as well. My assailant came with a friend, my lawyer, and the epic Crown attorney, Kara, was there. And honestly, like the largest contrast from the horrendousness of court you could imagine. Like, it was a self-care sanctuary with quotes about courage on the wall. We wrote down values and placed them in the middle. We essentially had an altar. They made it as safe a space as possible. And there were 2 circle keepers who basically just asked one question, which is, what brought you here today? And we spent 8 hours going around that circle saying what brought us here today.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was back and forth between you and him.
Everyone in the circle would speak. So we'd actually go around the circle. And one of the only rules was that you speak from I. So you're constantly, I experience this. And honestly, like when people say, oh, restorative justice is soft on crime, it's too easy, I kind of laugh, because if you haven't experienced it, you have no idea how hard it is for everyone. I could feel how hard it was for him. Like, it was him having to face what he did, like really having to face it rather than boxing it away. And it was like every emotion to its extreme throughout the day, like so much intensity. But and in the end, so much healing, like this epic sense of, I honestly feel like I did the impossible. Like, I achieved like everything I wanted. I brought my heart into the justice system, and I asked the justice system to match my heart rather than me having to like squish my truth and fit into their box. And that's just so empowering.
Well, you're definitely a leader in that way. And I want to acknowledge you for that. And we talk about humanizing the system. And you're right, like as restorative justice looks like a softer option, right? Like, okay, well, they're not going to jail, they're not paying the time. However, so I see two things. When you get to sit down with him, both of you are getting complete, like you're getting to express yourself and he's getting the opportunity to share where he's coming from, where a lot of these people who have committed crimes have not had the opportunity to really express what's going on there and really dig deep. And that's where the second thing is, that's where like the hard work comes, and most people want to avoid it. Like it's easier to throw people in jail, even from the government side of things. It's just easier to incarcerate people rather than actually, and we do this every day with people, it's harder even with our loved ones to sit down face to face and go, okay, here's what's actually there for me, and here's where I'm hurting, and this is where I need support, instead of just locking somebody up in a box or walking away from the problem going like, okay, like just avoid it, it's easier that way, and no healing is done. And on the flip side, then they, people come out, they don't get true rehabilitation, this, and then the cycle happens again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I feel it's really about breaking those cycles of violence, and not just stopping that cycle, but actually creating a new one of like, what do we want in our dream world? What is the outcome? For me, in my dream world, my assailant becomes like a leader in stopping sexual violence. So it's like, instead of just tolerating, you know what I mean? It's like raising our expectations of what's possible in terms of empathy. And I think if we hold on to the knowing that transformation is possible for people, then that's how our world's going to heal. But when we're so quick to give up on each other and say, you screwed up, let's throw this person away, we're done with them forever, like, what message does that send to people? And then of course they lash out with violence and crime because they're hurting inside.
Exactly. And through your experience, like I always talk about the gift and the pain, what's come out of this is this beautiful movement that you've created called Rehumanize. So can you share about that? Like what's that? Obviously it's inspired by your experience, but what is Rehumanize all about?
Yeah, it's really about the why behind restorative justice. It's really about moments like this of raising awareness and education by shifting hearts and minds around these really like broad ideas of empathy and love and transformation. And we created this, of course, because of my story, which like came out in the media, so many different interviews in November. And I just realized like, this is so much bigger than myself. So we really need to keep this conversation going. And what I've been seeing is that there are so many restorative justice organizations who can lead processes, but no, like the broad public doesn't know about them. Like I think back to that moment right after rape when I literally actually Googled like, what do you do after being raped? And nothing. Like I had no idea to seek out a restorative justice agency. So Rehumanize, we want to make this such a mainstream, well-known conversation that, like, unfortunately, if anyone experiences violence, they at least do have the informed knowledge and support they need to seek out resources that will really be healing for them. And this is so like I'm using this language now of court is abusive. Like court is an abusive experience for victims. It's not just re-traumatizing. And so people who have experienced sexual violence really deserve an option that will bring them both justice and healing. So we're creating a resource directory. We're raising awareness and education through workshops and webinars, and we're just going to keep growing and speaking like this.
Yeah, that is absolutely beautiful. And you're right, like even thinking back to when my attack happened, it's the same thing. Like that's not an option that's presented. Right? We go with what we know, but it would be beautiful to hear or to see someone in that experience be presented and go like, okay, so this happened to you, this has happened, and here are your two options. So you can go this route or this, and not saying that incarceration should be wiped off the table or that it needs to be, but at least have that option of a restorative justice process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this awareness of, yeah, I know you're doing this so beautifully, and this is the work of Cut 50 and Day of Empathy and Flip the Script, is like, why is it that justice and punishment are synonymous versus justice and healing? And like, I've been playing around with swapping out these like classic lines of the crime should fit the punishment and switching it to the healing should fit the punishment.
Mm,
Yeah.
that, I
Yeah.
love it so much. By the way, yeah, can I see your earrings for a sec?
Yeah.
I think I have one of those they're like pretty exact to that, not the ones I'm wearing today, but I'm like, wait a
Oh, wow.
second. They're like colors. They're beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful work that you're doing with Rehumanize movement. And I didn't know it was that recent, because you said like a year ago, right?
The
That you were,
circle, not
yeah.
even a year. Like the actual circle was like the end of this past summer.
So still new. And I believe from our a prior conversation that you haven't been able to follow up with him just because of there's probably privacy issues.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would want to see moving forward, where someone can follow up with the perpetrator?
Yeah, like something that my lawyer said is we're making this path as we walk it, because this was like, as far as I know, in North America, this was the first time that this has happened for sexual violence through the legal system with no conviction at all. So it really was like a make it as we go, and that is something I would change. I do think there should be some kind of follow-up option, and just to keep it human as well, like in the land of court, like the victim and perpetrator are as far away from each other as possible, but there's so much healing we can experience by like coming together, asking the questions, getting our needs met. So I think just like to step out of that punitive model where we're so separated and like not allowed to even think about one another, like it would be quite human to say follow up is allowed. What do you need? How are you feeling since the circle happened?
Mm. Yeah, and that also reminded me too, like when I got to forgive not just my husband, but the guy who instigated the gang rape. And I was saying earlier, another guy who held up a gun to me for not having sex with him when I was 16. When I went back in my adult years, and this was 2014, and face to face forgave them and had that opportunity, it was really, really powerful. So I know not everyone has that opportunity to do that in person, and I always say you can just forgive in your heart, but there was something to actually doing it face to face that just made it that much more powerful and complete for me. So I totally get, like, when you say that, like, going forward, if there's a way to keep in touch, because you don't know the impact you've had on this man's life now and how he's transformed. Like maybe he didn't, like we don't know, but maybe you did. And I'm sure you did. I mean, I wish I was on a fly on the wall when he got the news, like, wait a second, she doesn't want to push these charges for me to, be incarcerated and convicted of this crime. So did he even express that in the healing circle? Like, I can't believe you're doing this, or thank you for doing this?
Yeah, honestly, it was like the best case scenario in my mind. Like I like to say it exceeded my expectations, but aligned with my dreams. The way the whole circle went, like even though it was so hard at times, like by the end he did express, like he was like, I do want to help stop sexual violence. Like I do. And like I was able to say things like to him, like, you're not going to prison, so make meaning of this in the same way that I have. And I do think his story, just like the work you do, I do think every person's seat in that circle, all of our voices and stories are important. And I do feel he was transformed. And even the friend he brought with him, who was just like a random guy, like not connected to the story at all, his life was changed. He broke down sobbing and said, like word for word, he said, in my 25 years of life, in my 8 years of working, and my 4 years of school, I've never learned more than I have today.
No way.
Yeah, it was so
That's powerful.
So, and then how does that ripple, right? So I am so curious about that. Like, how has like his friends, moms, sisters, brother been changed? Like, I don't know, right? Those ripples.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely an example of leading with love and compassion,
Thank you. You too.
you know, and it, 2020 just helping elevate consciousness. And when I think of criminal justice reform, this is what I see: more restorative justice options, more humanity, more empathy, more compassion, caring about people. Like, one of the biggest things as human beings is we want to be acknowledged. So even for him, just a simple, like, it could have been one thing, even if within like 1 minute he felt acknowledged, that was huge for him.
Yeah. Yeah. He cried, he apologized, like he expressed gratitude. He asked, like, it was such an amazing moment. Like at the end of the circle, he really embodied consent and was like, with permission and respect, I would really like to shake yours and your mom's and your sister's hands as like a way to show my respect and gratitude. And it was honestly like breaking a spell, like these like really intense power dynamics that were really haunting me. It was like that dissolving by this like new way of meeting with respect and apology and so much realness. And I like too, like, I love that we're coming together for Day of Empathy, because I think sometimes people think there's sides, like, oh, are you talking about incarceration or are you talking about victims? And there's no sides in a circle. Like, there's no sides in a circle. So it's like, it's the same topic. If we're talking about reform, like criminal justice reform, it's the same as talking about survivors' right to healing justice. It all goes together, which is like amazing.
Yeah, we're all human beings. And so my question for you is, this is Day of Empathy. What does empathy mean to you, and how do you see empathy playing a role in criminal justice reform moving forward in Canada?
Yeah, beautiful. When I think of empathy, I think of like babies. I think of just this knowing that all of us were babies once. And I see it as such a simple thing. I really believe that empathy is the natural state that we come into the world with, and it's how we are naturally before we experience wounding or violence or conditioning. So to me, it's like returning to our roots. It's coming back to the way we were meant to be here, with love. And this really simple, like, I think of like little kids saying like sharing is caring, like this thing of I have feelings and they matter, and you have feelings and they matter. And like, we're all sharing this planet together. So let's make it nice for each other. Like, so basic to me. And how does that play into the system? I would love to see, first of all, I'd love to have like, this movement of humanizing each other. So rather than, for every seat in that circle, rather than saying like, oh, a crime was done to the crown, it's like, no, a crime was done to a human body. Let's ask that human how they feel and what they want and need. And let's really focus on transformation rather than punishment, like really focusing on this long-term collective safety and healing. And just way more access to restorative justice is basically what it comes down to.
That is beautiful. And it really is a return to love, and helping people remember, like, as you know, this, we're spiritual beings in a human body, right? Not human beings having some spiritual experience. So I so believe in that as well, like returning to love, like that is what, not who we are, but that's what we are, is love. And yes, somebody might commit a crime, but that doesn't take away from them being love, and everybody's on their own journey. So who are we to judge somebody else's journey? So beautiful. And I want to also acknowledge your mom, Barb, right? I think she's watching. Barbie.
Yeah.
Hey, Barbie. I'm sure she's listening in there. And I want to acknowledge her as well, because she's she's your mom, and I know she's been there for you as a strong source of support throughout this whole process. And she put a heart there. And was she surprised when you wanted to do this, to pursue restorative justice?
I know, like, she's so beautiful. Like, my mom is so beautiful. I bet you right now she's crying. Like, I bet you like, her heart is just big. And this basic principle of human kindness and following your heart was definitely in my upbringing. It wasn't my whole upbringing, but that's definitely what she always brought to my life. And she didn't know about restorative justice at all, but I think that I think that she gets this. And I so appreciate when people get this. It's about what I want. It's about what the survivor wants and needs. It's not really about, like, so many people try to be there for you as a survivor by saying, like, oh, I would kill the guy. Like, I care about you so much, I would kill the guy. And I'm like, well, you're not even listening to what I actually want and need and I'm feeling. And my mom's so beautiful in really prioritizing, like, healing and, like you said, love. And she was in the circle, and we've launched this organization together. We also lead women's retreats together. She really, like, she was my rock when I was a mess after this experience. So I'm so grateful for her.
So good. And I mean, that's a demonstration of the ripple effect of love, leading with love. Like, you got that from her. Oh, she's crying. we won't ask you to come on camera then, Barbie. That is beautiful. And does anybody, if you have any last, I know, Erin, thank you. You've been great in asking people. If anyone has any questions for Marley, feel free to type it in the chat while she's still here. And in the meantime, Marley, how can people find out about Rehumanize?
So if people go to rehumanizemovement.com, that's where our site is. And people can also follow my personal page and work. It's just like Instagram is probably best, Marley Liss.
Amazing. Beautiful. And again, I want to acknowledge rehumanizemovement.com. And Angela says, huge thank you for sharing it. I don't have the whole thing opened here, but I can see a little blip there. I hope you can see it too.
She said, huge thank you for sharing your amazing heart. Thank you. So beautiful. Yeah.
I know Angela, she's a hugger. She would just squeeze the heck out of you right now. See? Beautiful. Well, I want to acknowledge you, Marley, just for this beautiful, shining example, of everything that you've been through and the courage to move forward, because it's not an easy process. And for you, it's still quite new. Like you said, it hasn't even been a year. So I just really want you to get how powerful and how strong you are, and what bright of a light you are in this world, and the leader that you are. And like I said, I'm excited to create with you going forward. And especially on this side of the border, like, we're like, let's show them what Canada can do, And yeah, if we connect you with Senator Pate, because I know you haven't officially met her, but Kim, because she is passionate about this area and she's an advocate for decarceration, she may be a good contact for you, especially to connect with.
Yeah, that would be beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I just want to make sure before we let you go that if there's any other questions here. I don't think there's anything else. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with for today?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. It's such an honor to be a part of this movement. Like, this is such a beautiful and needed movement in our world. And yeah, I'm grateful for Cut 50 and Day of Empathy, and for you and for all the people who have paved this path. I know, like, so much happened before me in the realm of the women's movement and healing and all of this to make my experience possible. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, beautiful. And I just want to say, it was funny because I want to share this with everyone else. So Marley and I are part of Cut 50, as I had mentioned before. And when I first spoke to Lewis, like this must have happened at like the exact same time, because Lewis was like, do you want to be our first Canadian partner? And I was like, sure, I'll come on the call. And then Marley pretty much got the same message. So we get on the same call that's joined by all other Americans, and Marley and I are the only two Canadians. And I was like, wait a second, there's another Canadian. And you're like, oh, I didn't know there was another Canadian a part of this. So we're like, we'll have to tell Lewis that, like,
Yeah.
But it's beautiful at the same time to have Canada join in at this time. And, we have a lot of support. And like I said, like, let's show them what Canada can do, because there's so much. And I get it, because the States has such a massive issue around incarceration on their hands. And there's still work to do on this side of the border.
Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Marley. I appreciate you.
You too, sister. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Happy Day of Empathy.
See you soon.
Bye.
All right. Well, there we go. We had our first interview of the day, and we are bringing on Emily, and I see her there. Hey, Emily.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good, freshly showered.
You seem fresh and poppy. And you got your new t-shirt, I see, Come Back Snacks.
Yeah, I thought I'd be on brand today, get out of my sleeping gear or workout gear and be on brand. I brought some snacks. I'm trying not to, eat too much popcorn right now because I got to have lunch after, but, just here we are.
Popcorn can be addicting. Very cool. Well, I don't know when you tuned in, but I had briefly introduced you earlier. So this is Emily O'Brien, and Emily was convicted of being a drug mule and started a snack company while incarcerated. And originally it was called Cons and Kernels. Is that correct? Or Kernels? Cons and Kernels.
Yeah, Cons and Kernels.
Now you just changed it to Come Back Snacks, which I love, because you want to expand the line as well.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, oh, you already got the new t-shirts already. That was fun.
Yeah, of course. Vistaprint,
cool.
the best.
Yeah, awesome. So, and I couldn't remember, you're still in house arrest?
No, I'm done house arrest.
Oh, you're done.
So that was pre the sentencing.
Okay.
Then I went to prison. Then I went to a halfway house, which was like kind of like house arrest because they know where you are all the time. And now I live actually on my own. Like I have a roommate, but
okay,
independent living. Yep.
Okay. Very cool. So I appreciate you being on. Thank you for joining us for Day of Empathy.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great.
So I would love to have you start off by sharing your story. Like, people hear, the story of like, wait a second, and you don't look like the face of someone that was like, hey, I was a drug mule, like I moved these drugs for somebody. So if you don't mind starting with that, like, how did you get into this? Like, what happened?
I know, this is a question I ask myself all the time. And then I begin to look at it as like, okay, I had an amazing upbringing. Like there's nothing wrong with my childhood. But when I got into high school and I started using alcohol to kind of become more social, my parents didn't understand because they never abused alcohol. They never abused drugs. They're the most like straight line people ever. Like we went to church on Sundays, everything. But I found alcohol really helped me like be more comfortable with boys and intimacy and just talking to people. And so that eventually turned into like other drug use. Like I smoked weed, but then I started the heavier drugs in high school too. I cut that out pretty quickly so I could like pull up my grades to get into university. And my relationship with my family had turned quite sour at that point, just because I didn't want to listen to any of their rules. And then when I graduated university, I kind of traveled abroad, did all this traveling, really found value in learning from other cultures and just kind of taking in different energies. And so when I came back, I was like, oh, I want to like start a social media business and kind of help share other people's stories and their businesses. And with that lifestyle came a lot of events, a lot of networking. And I found myself struggling with the same kind of things that I did in high school. And this is like, okay, like how do I, business networking, all this stuff. And then in the midst of all this, my family got separated and it was like really hard on me. And there's also a lot of shame associated with being sad about something, being sad about a divorce at 26. Like so many people have said, oh, like weren't you old enough to like know better or whatever? Like, and so like, I didn't want to show it. And so I increased my substance use to try to like make it seem like I didn't care. But I think the fact that I cared so much meant that they did a really good job. They did a fantastic job in raising us, and they created so much love in that household that we didn't, like, it was sad to see it end, and sad to see people that you love in pain. And so more substance abuse. And then I meet this gentleman through my work who knows everything that I'm going through. And, you know, he actually like hires my company to do some work. Turns out like the checks start bouncing like much later, and his behavior just becomes a little bit strange. But like I was like clouded by what I like to call his verbal vodka, which is like nice statements, nice treatments, and actual vodka that I was consuming and cocaine. And he's like, I want to take you on a trip, like you need an escape. And I was like, yeah, I really need this escape. And when we get down to this all-inclusive vacation, which he booked pretty much immediately, after a couple of days, he's like, sorry, like we're not just here for vacation, like we're here to work. And I found out he was in a lot of debt, or so he says, whatever. And he's also told me, I don't know whether it's true or not, but he told me that, you know, he sent my passport ID off to these drug, you know, mover people in St. Lucia.
Right.
And that, you know, it's not a good idea to like cross with them and stuff. So I was ignorant, didn't know anything, wanted to go home. He was the only person I knew. I was kind of had to trust him, and I did it. I had drugs strapped to my body, and, you know, no one held a gun to my head. There was no violence. Like there's different forms of violence, but not physical violence. And like, I just did it. I just thought like I was doing the right thing to get home, and the right thing to like help this person that, you know, had brought me on this escape, whatever. So got arrested almost immediately. Like doesn't surprise me one bit, because
On this side of the border or in St. Lucia?
On Canadian side border. Yeah. So I was arrested, and because I had no coaching. I had lost my identity. I didn't know who I was. I knew who I was, but I didn't know who I was supposed to be. Like in his mind, nothing would ever go wrong. So there was no coaching on what to do if something was to happen.
Right.
And so I was like, I'm not going to sabotage this operation, because this is like the drug world, and I don't want to take my chances. Like I think the safest bet is to just be asked the questions, and then eventually I answered honestly, and I said, yes, I do have drugs on me right now. And then I got arrested. And that's when it all began. I think like that's when, you know, the shift really started to begin in me changing my behavior, becoming more aware of like my triggers and how I got there. And then I got to prison 2.5 years later, after 2.5 years on house arrest, and I got a 4-year sentence. You know, in the early days, I was like, there's no way I'm even going to prison. You know,
Right.
girls like me don't go to prison.
Right.
Right. It was inconvenient to me. It was like, I have a career, I have a job, I have this, and that.
I have a life.
And yeah, we always think like, you know, even like right now, it's like, oh my God, what about my work? What about this? Like, this is so annoying. Right. And then you really realize to see like what you can create in the midst of chaos. And so in the midst of all this chaos and adversity, I wanted to create something that kind of resembled me fighting back from this mistake and other people's challenges, like the challenges that other people, including myself, faced when faced with incarceration. And when I got to prison, I saw there's so many other women like me, and I got to know so many amazing, kind people that had, yes, made mistakes, but there had been so many like culminating factors into those mistakes. I'm like, holy crap, like, you know, I probably would have done the same thing, right? So it's like, okay, like I began to understand why kind of crime happens and why people do the things that they do. And so I was like, let's create a business that can kind of find a way to share our stories, find a way to employ ourselves, and make the world better. And that's when my popcorn company was born.
Wow. What a story. Thank you for sharing that. I want to backtrack a little bit. So
Sure.
Question. So number one, when you crossed the border, do you think that they already knew that you had the drugs, or it was just like, do you have drugs? And you're like, oh, I'm not going to lie about it. I'm just going to cop to this.
Yeah. Like it's been said, like I guess after they did the investigation, like my lawyer found out that they saw that he had been back and forth to St. Lucia multiple times. So I guess they finally saw, combined with my like, you know, hundreds of red flags, ones that I couldn't even control at this point because my body language was just I didn't know what to do. They realized that he'd probably been doing this the whole time, and they ended up investigating him and like taking like a lot of his stuff and money. And
Okay.
They didn't come close to me like that. Like they're just like, nah. You know, they could obviously tell, but still
And
had to be
did he fly
accountable for
back? Sorry, did he
that.
fly back with you that time, or you were on your own?
He flew back with me that time.
Oh, he went. Okay. And they arrested him as well?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. And my
Yeah.
second question then would be, fast forward, when you were in prison, like you were sharing that you've met so many kind, caring women in there. And this is a great day to share about it. You know, Dave Empathy, most people don't get to see what goes on behind bars, and they villainize people who are incarcerated. So
Mhm.
can you share some of the people that you were around, because they're like, what are you talking about? They're kind, warm people.
Yeah. When I first was sentenced in, like I was welcomed into the house that I was living in. I was shown all the rules. I was like cared for by people. Like women in prison, like I know it's very different from men's prison, but like there was people there that like want to see you do well. Like they'll tell you the rules so you don't mess them up. And you know, they told me like how to manage my food properly, and like they told me like how to cook, and like we did cooking and stuff together. And then I kind of like over the phone, like you'd hear people on the phone and you'd hear the struggles that they would have with the people that they were talking to. And you kind of got to see, like, I actually really realized my privilege at this point. And I also realized that like my life was like nowhere near as tumultuous as some of the people in there were. And like, I began to really see that crime is basically decisions based out of like emotional distress, uncertainty, fear, and those are all emotions every human faces 100%. So and I also began to realize that like every human kind of breaks the law. It's just like sometimes when one person breaks the law, one thing happens, and when another person breaks the same law, another thing happens.
Right.
Like for example, if you're going to choose, like you're like worried about something and you're panicking and you're driving too fast and you end up killing someone, or you don't, like you either get a speeding ticket or you kill someone. One of those decisions, or that same decision, will land you in prison in one scenario, and the same decision will land you with a $200 fine. Exactly. So it's kind of like, okay, we all kind of make the decisions at the time that will help us feel less uncomfortable. So, and to help us feel safer and to protect things that we love. So that's kind of what I learned. And
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when thinking about my co-accused, I began to really, because I had a lot of resentment for him at first. I had a lot of like hate, and I surrounded myself with people that helped me build up this hate. Like, because everyone loves revenge. Everyone loves getting back at people. And I was like, that is the most toxic mindset to be in. It wasn't putting me where I wanted to be. And then I kind of really realized what he was going through. Like he had made a poor business decision, which had left him feeling scared and him feeling helpless. And then so he found me as someone that maybe he cared for, but he was just so desperate at the time. And I know he regrets it, but like that's how I've been able to forgive him, because I saw how I made all my decisions and hurt my family and like embarrassed them. And so I kind of was able to see myself in him during that same situation, during the crime.
So I hear like you taking responsibility for what you did in your own life, and also having empathy for his, whatever he was going through as well, and blaming him. You forgave him. And are you still in contact with him? Like, do you know how he's doing right now?
He actually tried to reach out a couple times when I was out. Like at first I was like, I was like, this could be good or bad. I didn't know. So like I just told my parole officer, I was like, hey, kind of reach out to me. And I didn't know if it was a trap. Like I didn't know if it was like someone else messaging me. And so like he just said like, oh, I'm like really proud of you, et cetera, et cetera. But like forgiveness isn't really about, I think it's more about taking than it is giving. Like I think you're taking more of like your happiness back instead of like putting hate into something else, or like, yeah. So that's kind of how I see it. It also is about giving and giving someone their life back, but I think it's more about taking, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you also talked about like the difference between if you're speeding, say you're late for something and you can hit someone, kill them, or you can get a traffic ticket. It reminds me of that saying of like the only difference between us who are outside and people who are incarcerated is that they got caught.
Yeah.
And often that's the case in a lot of situations. So that reminds me of a time that I went into prison, and the volunteers were asked who has driven under influence, like whether it was drugs, whether it was alcohol. And nearly all of the volunteers had said that they did, right? And along with
Yeah.
the people who are incarcerated. So it just shows like, okay, wow, like do you see here how actually quite similar we are, and like we're human beings, and just you didn't get caught for it, and you could
Mhm.
be in their shoes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. It's 100% true for sure.
yeah, and so you had this idea. So you're in prison, and you're like, let's do something. Let's create. Like, was this just out of boredom, or did you always want to create a snack company? How did this come about?
No, like honestly, I thought snacks would be the last thing, considering I struggled with an eating disorder for like 10 years. So like the fact that but I actually brought that into the story because I wanted to create a healthy prison snack in an area where there's like limited exercise, right? So it was built for us, for our community. It was a way to like bring us together and share and find joy in this tumultuous, like hard situation. And it was also kind of a comfort food that, wouldn't lead to like necessarily like a binge, like, because there's eating disorders are very prevalent in prison, and often eating disorders are what lead to substance abuse, which lead to prison. So I wanted to find a snack that could help like mediate that anxiety as well. And so like the original recipes were all healthier recipes. Like they weren't like covered in butter and stuff like that, or they weren't like very like sugary or anything like that. They were all healthy, so that people could be like, oh, this is really good and healthy, and we can like talk and laugh by sharing it.
Right. And when you did that, did the correctional officers know that you were doing that you were actually creating a brand?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people like didn't take me seriously, and I love that. I love when people don't take me seriously, because like I thrive on challenges. Now I've learned to thrive on like positive challenges. And sometimes when you have like alcohol and substance abuse, you learn to thrive on negative challenges, right? So I was like, this is something where I can actually like prove people wrong by doing something right. So, and I knew I began to like kind of rechannel all my like revenge for my co-accused into something like positive. Like the best kind of revenge is something good instead of something bad. So, and you built something that like no one else can also like take from you. Like it was such a good feeling to know that I built that with like, even though I'd like lost all my freedom, I lost almost all my money, I lost my relationship, like people had come and gone, and like I was like, this is something that I can really build like from my soul, like with like the bare minimum. And sometimes the bare minimum is what you really need to build something strong, instead of all these other things. Like you need to like start with the roots.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's resilience right there.
yeah.
I love it. And so when you're creating this brand, was there any kind of programs of any kind of entrepreneurship while you were incarcerated?
There was there was one program. There's actually two. One of them, I wasn't allowed to go down from my minimum unit to the medium unit. They just like wouldn't drive me down. And then the other one was like this really, really intense business program where they brought in these like older businessmen, and like it was just so over everyone's head. I was like, I won't even do this. Like they were doing like financial projections for like the next 5 years, and it's like, okay, like this is like really intense. And I know the prison probably paid a lot of money for it. And so like, why wouldn't you just teach people to use what they have, like how to use stuff in the prison, how to write letters to get people's attention, right? How to connect with volunteers so that they'll help you on the outside. How to, I guess, like take pictures, not take pictures, but like learn about like marketing and social media and stuff, and all these free resources that were actually available in the prison that didn't require a lot of capital.
Yeah.
And so I ended up like writing, like I had popcorn kernels and some stamps, and that's what I started with. And I spent some time on the phone, and then I just like went to work, and I realized that I do have an education. And so doing research was fun for me. Like I know how to get scholarly articles. Like I got like the librarian to print me out like academic journal articles on women in the drug trade. So I knew that I wasn't like just going crazy with the fact that I thought this was ridiculous. And then I also got my friends, like my mom and people, to send me current market research from the internet about like facts and trends and even test popcorn recipes. And then they would have to reformat these articles because you weren't allowed to have articles from the internet in the prison. So I had them like reformat them to make it look like it was like in a letter, like a Microsoft Word document.
Wow. Well, they say one of the markers of success is resourcefulness. And that sounds like exactly what you did. Like you made the best of what you had, even if you had to adjust some things. And when you were speaking, I'm like, oh, this sounds like a possible prison program going forward. Have you thought about that?
That's what I want to do so bad, but I can't right now because like I'm on parole.
Okay.
So, but it also in the meantime, it helps that I'm growing this like 1 year in, 1 year out, because then I can help plan. And I think what would really make a prison like entrepreneurship program successful is like there's follow through. There was no follow through for the last one. It's like, here's a 3-week program and like, bye, see you never. Right. And then with Comeback Snacks, I'm going to start building a fund so that I can have like, $500 like startup grants. Right. And then like a bigger incentive if they get to like reach different benchmarks and stuff like that. So I kind of like, I want to have my own like not Dragon's Den, but like some sort of program where I can offer grants and incentives.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. And so your company app now is based in Hamilton?
Yeah, it's like it's called Dundas, but it's like a part of Hamilton.
Okay, and then so moving forward, would you hire people who have criminal backgrounds?
Yeah, that was my focus.
I figured that would be an answer, but
yeah, and now like that it's called Comeback, I can now incorporate people that have like maybe really bad problems with addiction and stuff like that as well too, because I want it to be a safe place to work. And modern, like a lot of employers don't offer like really safe places. Like you can't talk about your addiction, you can't talk about your like things that you have, like people will like tell on you or something like that, you know what I mean? So it's like with mine, I encourage people to talk about their struggles, because that means like they can come to work and like it's also a form of therapy when you can feel safe. And it's so like it's such a great feeling when you can be like, yeah, I went to prison and like, oh my God, I had a craving last night or something like that. And so just being able to actually support people in the present state instead of pretending to be like this perfect person, because no one is. And I think that's often what also leads to more substance abuse, is pretending like you have to be so straight line. This is because none of us are.
Yeah, and that's the humanity that you're bringing to this, right? Like we talked with Marley earlier, and we all want to be acknowledged, and even just like talking to somebody face to face and acknowledging what they're going through makes a difference, instead of pushing it aside or putting this face on, or we can't talk about that because we're going to be judged, because the workplace is, this is a big no.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Beautiful. And
thanks.
My question for you is, what does empathy mean to you, and how do you see that playing a role in the criminal justice system in Canada?
Empathy means understanding and not hating people for doing things without even knowing the situation. Like, but that's like what the media does. It's like, oh, this is what this person does. Like, empathy is getting to know people and finding forgiveness and kindness even when harm has been caused. I think that's really what empathy is. And not passing judgment on people for an action that they've done, or coming to conclusions without actually knowing anything about people. And that's exactly what I'm fighting for, is that. And because that's the worst when you see it in the workplace. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, sorry, you did this like one time. And like now, even with these online applications, there's even less in-person interviews. It's like, oh, you click that box and like,
that's it.
You don't even get a chance to explain.
This goes right to the trash. Yeah, there's some movements like ban the box. That's one of them. So they're saying like, let's just get rid of that so that we're not filtering based on a criminal history.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Canada has, to be honest. I think that ban the box is in the States, but it'd be great to see more of these things where it's not like that's the deciding factor right away, because let's face it, most employers go, oh, criminal history, right to the trash, right to the bottom of the pile.
I know. What I'd also like to see, and what I see in the States, Cherry Garcia,
okay,
she has this employment agency called Cornbread Hustle, and that's where employers go in and actively seek out people that have been incarcerated.
Very cool.
Because they see the true value. Yeah, like I know Virgin Trains does it. Like they go into prisons like in the UK and I like do hiring programs within the prisons.
Oh wow.
So I think more active like recruitment like that is necessary, and is worth it, because like I've been in business for a year and a half, and there's been, I think someone missed one shift once. Like my staff never like are ill to come into work. Like it's, and even if like if they want to come into work every single day and they're so proud of what they do. And like, I'm so proud that they're proud, you know, because that's the whole point.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think, if more employers can hear what the benefit is to them for hiring people with criminal histories, they'd be more inclined to even just consider it instead of dismissing it. Because there's a whole list of reasons why you should. And even when you're saying like they're more inclined to, they said people that have criminal histories and have a job, they're the ones that are more likely to stay later and come earlier because they're proud that they have this job and they know it's hard to come by, and they take it more seriously. So that's just one thing.
Yeah, exactly. And what else was I gonna say? And people that have been through like the criminal justice system are resilient as hell. You know what I mean? Like it is not easy going through the system, coming out and being like, this is my story. And to me, like that is like, I just love it when people are proud to and feel free to talk about their past. Like, I think it's really empowering your workers is what makes people stay and be loyal and feel motivated, and encourage others to work with them as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Someone just shared with me yesterday, he's a law of attraction coach, and he said the most powerful force in the universe is sharing.
Yeah.
You know, we get so much through sharing, right? Like even you being on here.
Good and bad right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing is like
Corona joke.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This Corona thing. That's the other thing too, right? With, thank you for bringing that up with Day of Empathy. It's also remembering our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated with COVID-19 going around. Like, I think it was just in California the other day for the first time, it had entered one of the prisons. And it was heartbreaking to hear somebody say they were afraid of dying before they got out of prison. You know?
Yeah.
So just, you know, remembering them as well. And I know people in the States especially are talking to their governors and their senators in terms of like, what can we do to release people who are not nonviolent offenders and who are just there on like a ticket violation or minor marijuana, you know, charges.
Yeah.
We can let them go. So what and how do you see empathy playing a part in the criminal justice system here?
Even right now, I can see it happening with them releasing some people. I think empathy is important when, I guess, when you have everyone in their family has known someone that has like 13% of Canadians have criminal records. So that means like that's a lot of Canadians that have records. So everyone, I think, on this planet knows someone that has struggled with substance abuse or that has struggled with a lot or mental health issues, and or even just like, you know, finding work or employment. And so those issues are, everyone is surrounded by them and is impacted by them. So I think the justice system, like there needs to be more action, like, and support from top down. Like we got Kim Page who's doing great things. Yeah. But I think like these bills need to get passed. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. And I'm excited to interview her at 4 today because I want to know, like, because it's not the default way of operating, you know, restorative justice options like we were talking about with Marley. So I'm curious to know from Kim, like, what other colleagues do you have who are supporting you on the front line, or are you getting a bunch of flack from people and resistance? So
yeah,
I'm curious to know.
Everyone wants like punishment until it has to do with them, right? Until like exactly. It impacts them directly. Then they're like, no, give me mercy. Right?
Yeah, not me.
But it's so much easier to punish the vulnerable than it is the strong, like the powerful.
For sure. For sure. And by the way, your popcorn is delicious.
Oh.
I think it was the dill one that I had was just like, oh my gosh, I have to stop myself. Otherwise I'll eat a whole bag or 2.
Yay. And again, like that's what we're going through right now. Like even as a business owner, you know, you like right now you get like lots of pressure from people to like close or whatever. And I think the popcorn was built on coming through a difficult situation together. And as a snack, you're an essential business and people need to eat and stuff. So I'm like, hey, like our popcorn is packaged in a place that touches way less hands than that bag of chips on the in the supermarket, right? So
Yeah.
I think fighting through like this adversity is, just makes the brand stronger.
Yeah, well, I wish you so much luck with that, and I'm
Thank
sure more
you.
popcorn, especially the dill one. I appreciate you
Thanks.
being on, Emily. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, we'll be in
All
touch
right.
soon.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
I meant to say, if you guys have any questions, again, remember that you have the chat available, and we have Laurie coming on, Laurie Lazar, and I saw her there somewhere. There she is. Let me take a sip of water. Hey, Laurie, can you hear me? There you are.
Yes. Bye.
Awesome. Beautiful white shiny teeth. I meant to say, if you guys have any questions, again, remember that you have the chat available. Oh, I think. And you have something running on your end.
Oh.
Laurie coming on, Laurie Lazar, and I saw her hearing my voice. Here she is.
There we go.
Perfect. How's it going, Laurie?
Good. How are you, Jessica?
Good, good. And I mentioned before that, I don't know when you had tuned in originally, you are our only American on today's call. We welcome you, and you're obviously going to talk about authentic relating. And you are in Colorado.
Correct. Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado. Amazing. And so Laurie is the co-founder and executive director of Authentic Relating International. And I want to share how I got to know Laurie. So a really good friend of mine, Luke, who now lives in Bali, he did this course called Authentic Relating. And Luke is one of those friends who just does so many different courses, and it's all about spirituality and like connecting and love and kumbaya stuff. And I love him because I've done a lot of courses like that. I'm not putting it down or anything. And so I was like, okay, here comes another course. But when he shared it, it was another level of like, dude, this is so powerful. And he came over here and he did some exercises with me. I'm like, oh, I see the shift here. Okay. I see. And I told him to, keep me posted on some courses. Never got to one yet. However, I hear how powerful it is. And I know Aaron had mentioned, I know you haven't officially met Aaron. Aaron's partner had done an AR course, I think at least one of them. So the work is no doubt, there's no doubt that it's powerful. And so if you can start off by sharing, Laurie, what is authentic relating?
Yeah, that is a good question. Authentic relating it's a set of skills and tools that can enable people to have deeper connections with other people, is really what it is in short. And so it's skills that you can apply right away in your relationships and your communication with someone. And it's also a way of being in life, a way of being that's more perhaps attuned to the center of who you are. And so it's a body of work it's been being developed, for the past, say, 25 years. And I came in contact with it in 2014 here in Boulder at the Integral Center. And I did a 6-month course that was an intensive course. And then my husband was so moved with the changes that he saw in me that he did the next 6-month course, and I assisted in that course. So I was really involved with it for an entire year, 2014 and 2015. And for me, what's so powerful about authentic relating is it's given me ways of being, navigating through conflict, navigating through difficult feelings when I'm uncomfortable and I don't know how to say something. And in the past, I would have just not said it, and then it would have come out sideways somehow. And now with authentic relating, I have actual tools that I can use to bring things forward that, aren't necessarily easy to share. And, so that's in a nutshell what authentic relating is. There's a lot of different ways to say what it is.
Yeah. So it's a form of communication. And so not necessarily with words, right? So like the exercise I did with Luke, for example, he laid down on the sofa and he said, put your feet on my belly. And he was breathing in and out. And it was to mimic a baby on its mother's chest or something. And there was something really comforting about it. And then he shared this other exercise of like, that he did with someone else, where it was like, okay, this is comfortable for me. And instead of like say, or being in a circle, and if you feel uncomfortable, to actually say it instead of like, oh, whoa, that's making me feel uncomfortable right now, instead of holding it in and like not saying anything. So I feel like that's the authentic part in authentic communication. And again, I haven't done the courses. I'm just sharing my experience with what Luke had shared with me. So, you know, we talk about humanizing the system, and you, Authentic Relating is doing work right now in Colorado prisons, right?
Yes.
So you have a course, like how long is the course?
Okay, so what we're doing in Colorado right now is we have a 2-day course. It's called The Art of Being Human. And we have delivered that course now 22 times behind bars in Colorado, and to both men and women, to over 450 people. And it's a 2-day course. And in some prisons, we do follow up with that as well. We also have Zoom follow-up calls every other week with actually a men's, women, and a women's prison on the same call as follow-up. And we're developing a follow-up day, full day for graduates that have done it, so we can kind of keep the cohort going, you know, and deepening the skills. So that's really what we've been offering. And the response has been, you know, pretty impactful. And yeah.
So can you walk us through what goes on in the 2 days? What do they go through?
Okay, so the 2 days is really, it's a combination of, you know, learning some new ideas and models in which to look at life through, and a lot of very experiential experiences. So people will be, you know, working in 2s and 3s and practicing new skills. And it's that real connection with each other that I think is so impactful, especially in the prisons. You know, we're going into prisons. We do the same work on the outside. And by the way, there is a course with our sister organization, Art International, is offering the same course that we're doing in prisons is starting online, since we're all online now, right? And so people want to experience this work for themselves. You can do it online. And so in the course, it's a combination of a lot of things, but basically people are interacting with each other almost the entire course. A lot of eye contact, a lot of reflecting what you hear someone else say, and sharing impact. How is it impacting you? And so it's really getting in touch with like, what's happening over here more and more? How do I get in touch with myself and come into a deeper relationship with myself, so I can then have a deeper relationship with you and a more authentic relationship with you?
I love that. And what's a typical like first day look like? Like, do they come in apprehensive, like what is this stuff, and maybe a little bit closed off?
Absolutely. You know, we have found that we do this, we want everyone to opt in. At first we had like classes of people coming, like, oh, the pre-release class will come and do this, because the leader of the pre-release course was so excited, and he said, well,
sure,
a month-long course, and if they could do this in the first 2 days, it'd be amazing. But they weren't opting in. And when people don't opt in, they still get into it, but they also, it just takes them longer, right? And it's better for people to opt in. So everyone comes in, they've chosen to be there, basically just from seeing a flyer on the wall at the prison. Okay. And we have wait lists at many of the prisons right now. People want to do this course now that they've heard other people have done it, and they've seen the impact on their fellow residents, that they want to do it. And so, yeah, you know, but people come in still apprehensive, because, you know, when you do any course, you don't know what it is, and what is this thing, authentic relating? What is that? What are they going to make us do? And it's exciting being in there and watching people open up, you know, as the course unfolds the first day. We have people do pretty edgy things in there. Now, it's prison. We're not having them put their feet on other people's bellies or anything like that.
Yeah.
And we're not
touching allowed.
Yeah, there's really no touching allowed. So we can have this work happen. It doesn't have to do with having to touch anyone physically. It's touching in a, you know, kind of much deeper place. And so, yeah, it's powerful.
And I imagine for many of them, the first time they're doing any kind of work like this.
Oh yeah, some of them, you know, they're actually, you know, I mean, a lot of them, you'd be surprised, have done a lot of work already. You know, a guy in our very first course that we did at the Boulder County Jail said at the end of the first day, and he had tattoos like from head to toe on his eyelids and everything. And he says, you know, I have been doing therapy since I was this high, and I've done every program in and out of the system for my whole life. And this is the first day of my life that I felt like something get in me. And I feel like I have this whole new possibility.
Wow.
And another guy said, a young guy who's maybe 22, 23. And he said, you know, I feel like this is the first day of my life I've ever just taken off my mask and felt comfortable in front of other people. And here he is in this group of, you know, other inmates that he hasn't spent, you know, much time with. He's at the Boulder County Jail.
Yeah.
And by the end of that second day, there were men in there who have done 15, 20 years of time. One of them was actually he just got sentenced and he was about to go to prison. And he was one of the ones that said to us, this work is like nothing else we've done. We don't have access to anything like this. Please bring this everywhere in the system. This is what we need. And so that was the day I got my marching orders. And I started calling prisons in Colorado and saying, we have this 2-day course. Can we come and do it?
Yeah.
And it's really been, and then the first time we did it at the prison, we had a woman from another course, a woman that works at another prison, come and observe. And we asked her not to observe. We asked her actually to be in the course with us. And one thing that's special about what we do is we sit in a circle and we co-lead. So we usually go in with 2 or 4 volunteers, course leaders, and we're leading and sitting with them. And it's a co-creation. We're doing this together. We're not there to like show them that we know how to be really authentic and we're going to show you, you know, it's not like that. So I think they see that really quickly, and they also really appreciate how vulnerable we're willing to be, that we actually share from our lives.
Wow.
And because that's not always how they're treated inside. But so this woman came from another prison and she participated, and she was so blown away by the course that she brought us into her prison. And that's how it's kind of worked each time. And then one of the other times we did it, we had another staff person come in, and she's in charge of all the pre-release programs in Colorado. And when we were done, after participating with those men, she said, I want this for my staff. And so we did our first Department of Corrections staff training with all of her staff, which was leaders from the pre-release programs all over Colorado.
That is beautiful. I love to hear that. And there's something to, like, Colorado has been known for starting things off, right? And being progressive in many areas, and including corrections. So the lady who participated, all of them, they're all Colorado based, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And there's a new guy who is in charge. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when did he come in?
He just came in about just over a year ago.
Okay.
And yeah, and his main goal is to really normalize the system. He wants to normalize the system so that people are living a more normal life inside as they would be living on the outside. It's not so vastly different. So he's working on that right now. You know, of course, there's kind of a little wrench in the fire with the coronavirus happening right now. And yeah, so I do want to mention that, you know, the work that we're doing, you know, we're not able to go into the prisons right now. And, you know, we're just getting started in Canada. We have a whole Canadian team that's totally into, you know, ready to bring this into the prisons in Toronto and the Ontario area. And right now, you know, prisons all over are not allowing visitors to come in at all.
Of course.
And we don't know how long that will last. So, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I just want to tell you that we have the capacity to deliver this course online. And one of the most amazing things, Jessica, is that, you know, the byproduct of what we teach, of what we're offering, we're sharing a lot of practices and ways of being that people can take on if they want to. And what happens as byproducts that I've noticed is a sense of camaraderie that is so strong between the men or the women that we're with, a sense of brotherhood or sisterhood that just gets created. It's so palpable in the room. And, you know, through this time with the coronavirus doing what it's doing, you know, the effect it's having in prisons right now is that, you know, people are feeling really anxious, and there's violence that's bubbling up to the surface in many prisons around the world that I've been reading about. And our program, really is one that we can deliver to a group of inmates that are in a particular room together, and they can do the course even from us being out here. And one of the men in one of the courses said, I asked him, if you could tell, the wardens out there, why they should bring this program into their prison, what would you say to them? And he said, this course is going to bring any violence down that's in your prison. This will bring it down. And that's what he said. And I think that we can really help with that right now internally, as well as delivering skills for people on the inside to have deeper connections with each other and feel more, less alone. We say that connection is the antidote to addiction and isolation and loneliness. And they're not allowed to have visitors come in anymore, so they're just in there. And so these skills will allow them to connect more deeply with each other, maybe lower violence, but then also connect more deeply when they do get a chance to speak to their loved ones on the phone or through video, which a lot of prisons are working on right now. They'll have more of a chance to have a deeper connection.
Yeah.
And so I just want to name, and that, we've been doing this in Colorado only because we've been going in, but we can offer this to any prisons all around the world right now. And so I wanted to let you know that that's possible.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the common thread I'm seeing today is it's humanity. It's bringing humanity to, again, the system, acknowledging people, communication, Marley, sharing with the guy who raped her, like getting complete with what he had to say. And she got to speak about what she had to say and hear what he had to say. And that really opens up the pathway to love and healing. And I so love that you guys are doing the work in the prisons over there. And I hope that it expands to more, including on this side of the border. And with the online thing, do you find that, like over here, they're not allowed to have internet access? Do you find that's a barrier? I don't know if Colorado is different from other states, but do you find that that's a barrier in some places?
Definitely. Yeah. Most of, they had given tablets to everyone in the prison system here, and then some kind of breach happened. They took them all away, and now they have pretty much no access. If they're getting out soon, they may have a pre-release program that they can, be part of that class and start to access the internet a little bit that way. I mean, I'm finding that some of the prisons are equipped to do Zoom calls, and so we can do that, but not all of them are. And a lot of them really don't have a lot of access at all once you're inside.
So if you have a senator or a governor that's listening in today, what would be a request that you have of them?
My request would be to allow us to really bring this sense of connection into the prisons right now, where it's really needed so much. People are feeling isolated, alone, and lots of anxiety. And these kind of programs can have people's hearts kind of open up and their guards let down, and they can be together in a way that is more humanizing. One of the inmates said, he's like, this whole system is built to dehumanize us. And today in this program, I feel like a human again. Mm-hmm. And that's how we're going to reduce prison violence and anxiety right now.
Recidivism rates, right? When they get out, because they have new tools and they're seen differently, their being has transformed.
Absolutely. And they talk a lot about like, oh, I can't wait to teach this stuff to my children and break this, chain of violence and incarceration.
Yeah. And you and I had talked about a different call prior to this about having this work for frontline workers. So correctional officers, police officers, where like for me, I know that would be a personal policy ask of mine, of getting more services for frontline workers, because I shared with you before, a friend of mine, retired police officer of Toronto, 32 years, talks about walking onto a scene, stepping in somebody's brains and no support for that. And, another friend as well, retired detective of 10 years, Toronto Police Force, seeing so many suicides, people hung, brains again splattered on the walls. And not to be graphic, but to show that. And I said, is it true? Like, there's no support. And she goes, it's a joke. And yet these people are responsible for protecting our citizens, locking people up. And we know that hurt people. And there's a lot of focus on people who are incarcerated. And what about the people who are on the front lines that are also?
Yeah, I'm with you. You know, when we did our staff training, we had a woman in there who her father was a prison guard and her grandfather was a prison guard and she was a prison guard. And then she had worked her way into the pre-release, being a pre-release manager. And the first day of the program, we took a poll and we asked, you know, who's getting a lot out of it? And lots of people raised their hand. Who's not really gotten anything yet, but you're engaged. And who is like, this is not my thing. I would never choose to do this. I did not want to be here. And she was like this. And at the end of the second day, she was the first one to come up to me when the course was over. And she said, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, Laurie, and that's when she told me, my father, my grandfather, and me, we're all in the system. And I realize now, if my father had done this course, I would have had a different childhood. We would have connected. We would have had some way of relating to each other. And, you know, this whole way that we have to keep everything inside and lock everything up. And as staff, the staff for the prisons, you know, the statistics are they have, you know, higher suicide rate, they have higher divorce rates, they have lower mortality rates, and they need support like you're talking about. And these kind of programs, we'd love to do this with more staff and also with staff and inmates together. And I just want to mention, just for PC, I do use the word inmate. And I want to just mention that I've done a lot of thinking about that, and I'm very conscious about the word inmate. And I've asked a lot of people on the inside, what would you like to be called? And they all unanimously say, I don't want to be called an offender. Everyone's called offenders.
Right.
And they want to be, many of them have told me they inmate is the word that they like. And, you know, mate means friend. And to me, they're friends on the inside. And
yeah, and thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and it's not a wrong thing. Like, I know Cut 50 has like terms that we prefer to avoid, and it's perspective, right? And the meaning that you put behind a word as well. So I get the difference between offender versus inmate, if we were to go there. So, and if they feel comfortable with that, if they're okay with that, then, like, you know, who are we to say that's wrong?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. And so I know that there's a Toronto team that's looking to get this work in here, right? And I would love to connect them as well with Senator Kim Pate, who's going to be coming on later today. May not be able to mention it on the call, but later on. So what do you, I don't know if you can speak for them, what do you see as a barrier on this side of the border? Like, why is it that we can get in Colorado prisons, but not over here?
Well, you know, I think that there's different, like, due diligence process that's done in Canada that isn't done in Colorado the same way. It's really up to each individual prison here. And I think that, so it's a different process that they're going through. And I respect that they are, you know, absolutely doing their due diligence to get before they bring programs in. And, you know, one great piece of news is that one of the people on the team here in Toronto is a PhD in sociology and criminology, and she just got a grant to study the efficacy of the work that we're doing. And she's going to be studying it in Toronto. And so it'd be great to get the senator involved with that and following the study that comes out of that. So that's really exciting that that's happening there.
Yeah, that's Svetlana, right?
That's Michelle Savo.
Oh, Michelle.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely want to connect with them further on that, because I know we started a conversation, and I'm excited to see what can be created on this side of the border.
Yeah, absolutely.
And authentic. So just to be clear, so Authentic Relating started before you got involved, and your company is called Authentic Relating International.
Yes, Authentic Relating International. It's authenticrelating.org. And so I think there's a question on the line. I don't know how much time we have. There's also a letter I might want to read at the end if we have time.
Hi, Jessica. It's Aaron. We do have a question. I also have one, but Michelle, I'm going to let her jump on and talk real quick. She has a question for Laurie.
Hi, this is Michelle. I'm in the US, and I have a question for Laurie, and it probably relates to both people in the US and in Canada, but you mentioned getting people who are decision makers involved. Like, how can those of us who support your program and work in the prisons influence and help to get those decision makers to say yes and to spread the program? Is there like a letter writing campaign, or what's the best way for us to provide support?
Just communicating with them directly through their web pages, through their Facebook pages, and calling them is really the best way to get their attention and let them know that you know about our program and what it's doing, and you support it, and you want them to bring it more widely throughout the system. And and then you can also support us by going to authenticrelating.org. Definitely could use any donations that anyone's willing to give in this challenging time. And so I really appreciate that question, Michelle. But just letting them know that you're aware of the work that we're doing and reaching out to them, through all their avenues of connection.
Thank you. Keep it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And Aaron, you had a question?
I did. Hey, Laurie, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Aaron?
Well, so my question is, after you do the program with the folks in the different facilities, do you have anything currently that you're doing follow-up wise to work with people to kind of continue the work? Do you leave them material? What's your
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Aaron. And it was one of our biggest concerns when we first went in. We thought, gosh, what if we give them this program, and what if it's dangerous, that they become more vulnerable, and it's actually like they don't have the support in there, and how can we support them ongoingly? So we put together, we have basically a summary of the program. It's a 12-page summary that we leave them with, and we encourage them to start study groups with that summary. And we also offer Zoom calls every other week for the prisons that are willing and able to do that with us. So we can check in with whatever graduates want to get on that call every other week. And we're also developing a follow-up full one-day program to do with the graduates. So, so it's really, so we're just developing more and more of a program around this. So it's not just a one-time, one and done. Oh, the other thing is we're developing that, a lot of the inmates have asked, can I be a champion for this work inside? And I want to be a leader of it. And so we're going to be leading, training some leaders on the inside that can continue to do the exercises that we did in the courses and other exercises, and put a manual together for them to keep it going. Beautiful. And the other thing is, I also wanted to mention that we offer them a free spot, them and one of their a closest family member, to do the course on the outside with our sister organization, which is called Art International. And that is authenticrelating.co. And they can do that course for basically $50 when they get out. We've been offering it for free this whole time. We just recently said, why don't we do it $50 for two people instead of just free for one and then the other person. So anyway, so we've had several people that were on the inside then come out and do our course on the outside, and that course is offered all over the world and right now online.
That's beautiful.
Love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Aaron. And if they wanted to get the course online, where did they go to? Is that your website as well?
Not our website, authenticrelating.co. So it's almost the same. The sister organization is .co and we're .org.
Okay.
Okay. So, and we're both on Facebook as well, so you can find our Facebook pages there.
Awesome. And I love that you guys offer that for the family members too, because oftentimes they can be forgotten about. And that reminds me of Kabbalah. And in Kabbalah, they give out these little books called the Zohar. And the Zohars are distributed to so many different people who are incarcerated, like thousands of them. And they had great success in, I think it was all over, but the Dominican Republic. There was one prison there designed for 2,000 people, has 10,000 instead. And talk about overpopulation, overcrowding. So they delivered the Zohar program, and these guys got so much great transformation for themselves. And the Kabbalah people offered it as well to the wives, like the spouses and the children, so that they had the tools as well to relate when these guys either got out or even when they were visiting them. And that made a huge difference.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it's great that you guys do that. So I so appreciate you coming on, Laurie, and I'm glad that we connected recently, and I'm looking forward to connecting further. And like I said, seeing what can be created on this side of the border. I'm really excited to work with Svetlana and George and the rest of the team here. And is there anything like last minute that you want to say before you jump off?
You know, I think if we have 1 minute, can I read you this letter really quickly?
Go for it.
I want to read it to you. And I'll show it to you if you want me to. Here, share. So this is a letter from a guy named Tyler. He says, "My name is Tyler. I'm 22 years old, others know me as the Kid. Currently, I am in a Colorado Department of Corrections facility or prison. My first prison was," we can't say the name of the prison. "I have taken so many classes, and yes, some of them have helped me in some way or another. But the class I'm going to tell you about meant the most and made a major impact on my life. For example, I have made vital amends in my personal relationship. I have new healthy relationships with pro-social people. I loved how much a positive impact this class has made on my life and the others around me. I took it twice. The second time was at a lower custody level at the Rifle Correctional Facility. Oops. Let me tell you how much of an impact this class has had at a very dangerous prison. At this other prison, there was a major problem between opposite races and gangs, and a riot was soon to take place. But the main leaders of each gang participated in this class. At the end of the first day, the shot callers all had a sit down and practice the tools that were given to us. If you want specifics, people were going to be badly hurt, maybe even killed. And it didn't happen thanks to authentic relating. So me personally, I am thankful because I'm a father, a brother, and a son. I feel that it should be mandatory that men and women on the inside the system take this class workshop. If I would have done these tools, I would have never joined the Hells Angels gang. I would have probably not run to alcohol and drugs to self-medicate. I would know how to honor self. I would know how to react appropriately to others. I pray this program expands to not just adults, but our youth as well. This is my testimony of authentic relating. I am very grateful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a powerful testimonial right there. Thank you for sharing that. My hope is that people who are decision makers and higher ups in correctional facilities all over that are listening to see the power of programs that bring humanity, that are that help us connect and communicate and are like true rehabilitative programs, rather than just more anger management courses and, you know, get your GED and like these are the courses and programs that make a huge difference in people's lives far beyond the prison walls. And so I love the work that you're doing, Laurie. Thank you so much for doing this work and bringing your light to the world and helping elevate consciousness and making a difference in the criminal justice arena.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for having us be part of this. Really
I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. All right. So Erin, I don't know if you see Nico on there yet. I don't know if he's listed as a participant.
I don't see him just yet, but as soon as he jumps on, I will make sure he's on as a panelist.
Okay, in the meantime, let me just check because he said he would be on at 3. If anyone is on and has any questions in particular, feel free to drop them into the chat and I can answer that. Let me just see if Nico is, he says he's watching.
You know what? He's probably just watching on Facebook Live and maybe not on the Zoom channel.
Are you able to send him? Oh, he says no Zoom. One second, guys. Just trying to get him on. He said, send me another link, no Zoom.
I have his email.
Okay, he does have Zoom. Are you able to send him the link?
Yeah, I can send a link.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. I'm going to grab a drink of water here. Thank you, those who are tuning in still. He says sweet, so Nico is going to jump on. Nico is one of our musical artists. The other one is Tarek, and Tarek is a Toronto-based guy, and he is in New Zealand right now. And so he couldn't join us just because of the time differences. I'm excited because Nico is going to share a music video that they haven't released yet, and they're dedicating this to Day of Empathy, and he's going to talk about what inspired him to make this music video and the inspiration behind it and his own experience with the criminal justice system. So we'll wait for him to come on, and then after that I'll share my experience, and then we'll have Senator Kim Pate come on. And now, as a heads up, I'm intending and crossing my fingers. Her team said that she was called to the Senate this morning, and she's been sitting there all day. So I'm hoping that she's going to still make it on time for 4 o'clock. And let me just make sure here. And this is being recorded. It is being recorded, right?
It has been recorded, yes.
Perfect. So if you guys have people that would be interested in these topics, or anyone that you've seen on here, any organizations, please do feel free to share it with your network and your friends and your organizations, because as we talked about, sharing makes a huge difference. Erin, do you have any? What are you getting, by the way? You're there, and by the way, Erin, thank you so much for being there all day. What are you getting out of this? I'm curious.
Wow, that's a loaded question. I will say the first thing I'm noticing is just the quality of these stories that you and the panelists are sharing. I'm fascinated by the work that you're doing. I'm fascinated by the journey. And it's very obvious that everyone you've talked to so far has done deep personal work in getting to the place they're at, and then immediately giving that back to other folks so that those people can, walk on their own journey. And I think that speaks to restorative justice largely, is that while hurting people hurt other people, people that have themselves walked through a journey and got to a place of restoration, they tend to turn back and do the same thing. So it's just really good to hear that narrative over and over with at least 3 of you that are saying, hey, this is what we went through and this is how we are tackling in our world. So that's what I'm noticing most of all so far today.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's the underlying theme, the undercurrent that's there. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to hearing more of your story at some point too. I know we don't have that much time today, but at some point I would love to, because you and I just recently connected, and I know that you're doing work. It's a theater, right? Like you were asked to be part of a board of directors over there that's doing theater work for people who they're released.
Yeah, it's Modus Theater, and it's ironically based in Boulder, Colorado. They're close to where Laurie is at, and Laurie, we have a bunch of mutual friends we've never met, but I know a lot of people that know her, so it's really great to kind of be connected to her. But Modus Theater is just a fantastic organization that started out doing a particular series called Undocu Monologues, where they're telling the stories of undocumented immigrants and having people that are part of the justice system, like sheriffs and probation officers and ICE agents and DAs, tell their stories, and then recently have transitioned over to telling the stories of those that are impacted by the criminal justice system. And the folks that run it, Kirsten and Art's the director of the board, are just incredibly high quality people. And so I'm just really honored to work with them and continue that work there in Colorado with these stories. But also, I work in tech, so I'm looking at helping doing some workforce development inside of prisons in Colorado, as well as doing some diversity, equity, inclusion work. So all of this is just exciting me, to hear all these things that are already going on from folks that have been in this space for a long time.
I love it. I love it. There's so much healing that goes on with theater.
I agree. I'm new to it, but I'm feeling that. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Nico said he's raised his hand and he's on. Do you see him?
Okay, let me go back here. He said he raised his hand. You know, somehow it says your name. I'm going to see if this is him, okay?
Okay. I might have given him my link. That's why. That's him.
Is that him? Okay, all right. I'll let you guys.
Thanks, Aaron. Hey, Nico, can you hear me?
I do, yes, and there I am.
As Jessica Santanato.
Am I as is that my name? I'm in as Jessica.
Yeah,
That's
probably because
funny.
I sent you my link. All good. I appreciate you being here. Good to see you.
Yes, pleasure to be here.
How's it going?
It's good. I mean, with all that's going on, it's as good as it possibly can be. I mean, you know me, I'm a fire sign like you. I'm always optimistic, no matter
That's
how
right.
bad things get. You know, I'll always still be pushing forward and believing in that miracle ability to like just through optimistic thinking, that paradigm shifting mind state. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't stay put. I know fire signs, right? Got to get out, got to be doing stuff.
Exactly.
So I was sharing with people that you and Tarek had put together a music video and you're going to release today, and which I'm so excited to. That day was so cold when we shot. I mean, you guys dared most of it, but that was so cold. So when you guys see it, it's so funny because at the end I could barely say one of the words. I think it was the word movement, and it barely came out of my lips because it was so cold. But before we get to that, Nico, I know that you've gone through your own journey, and I have never heard the story, and you said that you're open to it. So I'd love for you to share with whatever you feel comfortable with. Share your experience with the criminal justice system and just your story overall, because I have not heard it yet.
Yeah. Cool. And it's good timing because, you know, like I say, I thrive when I'm live because I got nothing to hide, you know, and truly like my pride comes from, I'm a Leo. So my pride is my family. That's what they call a family of lions, right? My pride is my family, and my family is humanity. And in this time right now, you know, humanity has been called more than ever before, all of us, to really reflect, self-reflect. And, you know, coronavirus is like, is it's some scary stuff, but, you know, I always say this, and all my lines are always in rhyme because that's the whole premise of what I do with Fit Hop. And we'll get there in a second, how I came up with Fit Hop, because it was all in response. It was my healing to having not been incarcerated, but psychologically incarcerated, having dealt with the criminal justice system in the way that I did. But fear is the answer. Here's how it goes. If you seek and dare to answer that great question, why am I here? Then look in the direction of that which you most fear. You know, so right now humanity is being asked, you know, in this fear, we're able to answer this question: why are we here? And it was mentioned earlier, which I was following and listening. The opposite of addiction is connection. So now that we're connected completely, we can self-reflect and we can answer this question: why are we here? What is it that we most fear? And for me, to go back now, rewind, I feared most, I guess, not fitting into the sociological construct. Now, for me, I was a white boy growing up in the 90s. I loved hip hop. I loved the break dancing, the beatboxing, everything about the culture of hip hop. I just loved it. And I grew up in a school that was like very close to the projects. So there was a lot of, you know, Black people in my school. There was a lot of hip hop embodiment, you know what I mean? Because these Black people, they just naturally had the embodiment of hip hop. But I, as a, you know, the white boy, kind of like growing up, you know, and being in that world, was not adopted by the culture because I wasn't of that color, that race. Now, we all know in the world that after Eminem and all these guys, that hip hop is not about Black people or white people or Asian. Hip hop is like this creative spirit that no matter where you go in the world, it's this language that everyone speaks. everyone speaks that language, you know. And now maybe the rhymes, you have to know the language to really appreciate how an MC can formulate his message into rhythm and rhyme. But everyone can feel the nuances and the patterns because we have that thing called pattern recognition. So even if you don't speak the language, you really can appreciate that expression. Now, for me, I wanted to be part of the culture of hip hop, but I didn't quite fit into it. And it's amazing what we'll do. And I think especially males, males especially do this to prove themselves. We have so much to prove, and like what I was trying to, however, I was trying to fit in with this culture, it was not working. My only access, however, that I had to fit to hip hop was my fitness through breakdancing, because I could do some really cool tricks and I can, really demonstrate high levels of performance as a result of having been a competitive gymnast back in my day. So what happened is, in the pursuit and trying to fit into hip hop, I did a lot in terms of selling out to the self. And that's what happens when we try to fit into something that we are not. It comes with first feeling disconnected from ourselves. That's why we're trying to fit into something else. So for me, it was the disconnection between my own inner hip hop artist and what I came to later understand. Hip hop ultimately is this, and this is really cool for all of you really like good with words and acronyms. I'm going to drop it real quick. Hip hop is an acronym for Her Infinite Power Helping Oppressed People. All right. And the whole concept of why her, why she, there's two H's and one O in the word hip hop too, because like H2O, the water, the flow, this is what hip hop is being able to flow with life by having the courage to rise up and say, here's who I am. And when we say courage, literally the word courage, cœur, comes from heart. So hip hop is about the creative spirit, which in order to express that self requires that courage and confidence in that self to begin with. But because like going back to like all that I was willing to give up about myself in order to try to fit into that culture, I got caught into like the wannabe gangster, because there was a whole glorification. You know what I'm talking about? Like there was a period in which suddenly like we got really into the gangster East-West battle between Biggie and Tupac, and everyone was like really glorifying this idea of being a gangster. 50 Cent came in, it was almost popularized, the idea of being shot and walking around with guns and calling girls bitches and hoes and stuff like this. So all of that was like a sellout for me. And I think what happens when we are not living authentically and selling out, as which was mentioned as well, this all has to do with authenticity. You know what I mean? Having the courage to truly be ourselves. But what we do is we start escaping through abusing substances like marijuana or alcohol. In my case, I abused alcohol, and I reached a point where I ended up getting charged with the DUI. I got arrested. It was like a nightmare come to life. It's funny because I had nightmares of that too. Not being charged with DUI, but just being arrested. I never could imagine that. I always saw myself as like, I'm on your side. I'm a good guy. I believe in humanity, doing more good than bad. Again, I'm an optimist. Even in the midst of the worst, I'm still there to like, be a stand for humanity's evolution. And anyways, I ended up with a DUI and I resisted greatly. I hired a lawyer, even when my astrologer, I'm a big believer, and not just believer, but student is a better term, because it's not about belief. You don't need to believe in gravity to know that if you jump off a bridge, you're going down. But my astrologer, my teacher and mentor, he told me, don't fight that case. You lost. Saturn's returning. Saturn is in astrology known as the Lord of Karma. And at 29 years old, so for all the listeners know that around 29, when Saturn returns, you are up on the cosmic stand, so to speak. And he said, if Saturn is here, it's like you have no chance in that case. Anyways, I fought that case, and that cost me not just $20,000 in the lawyer fees, okay, but I had around that time got for the first time chosen in this audition of like, I don't know, thousands of people in Toronto. It was a crazy, incredible opportunity, a part which would have had me traveling all over Canada with Don Cherry. And I was going to be this like spokesperson in the campaign they were doing. Budweiser was doing for Budweiser Lights. Get this, the contract was like, I think it was a 5-year contract. It was like 80 G's for like only 6 months of doing the actual work. And then of course I had 6 months to myself, which would be amazing because I can continue building Fit Hop and everything else that I was doing with music. But anyways, I was asked right after I got the conviction. They asked me it was right after the conviction, which we appealed, and that was stupid too because I lost. The advice was given, don't fight it. But it was right after the conviction, and I was asked, as I was chosen, they congratulated me. Everyone was so excited. I was apparently like the perfect candidate for this campaign. And they're like, all right, we just got to do some things. He's like, you don't have a criminal background check, criminal record, right? Because we just got to do a couple things like background check and this and that. And I'm like, my heart just stopped. And it just sunk. You know that feeling, man? Where I'm like, I just knew this was it. I'm like, and do I say nothing and just lie and then just hope that it doesn't come up? I know it's gonna come up, man. Come on. This is what I mean by like, some people told me like, oh, you should have just lied and like let it go. And I can't lie. I'm like the sun in the sky, Leo, the lion. I'm authentic to the bone. The only time my life went wrong was when I stopped being authentic and completely naked in who I am. So I came out and I said straight up, I'm like, actually, and I told him I have a criminal record. Technically, I will have a criminal record because I just got convicted, but we're fighting this case and, it's going to be appealed. In any case, he was he lightened the blow for me. And he's like, he didn't make any conclusion there. I guess he was also being optimistic. He's like, well, we'll check with our, department. And they checked with their Department of Publicity, which of course, to the publicist of a alcoholic beverage company, having a spokesperson, man, I could have had grand theft auto. It could have been an assault. It could have been anything, but not DUI.
Yeah. Of all things.
Of all things, that would have been horrible. And if I lied about it and just let it kind of go and it took time, but who knows how much more turmoil it would have caused. Now, a whole company, alcohol. I don't want to be the cause of I don't want to acquire something because I cleverly lied. I'm not Scar in The Lion King. I'm like Mufasa or like Simba or like, the good guy, basically.
Right.
I use that metaphor often because to me, The Lion King it's Hamlet. It's a perennial narrative in humanity's existence. Evil, good, you know what I mean? The evil brother trying to overthrow the good guy. In any case, I always try to choose the right. And the only time I can say for sure that I know the only wrong thing there is that we can do is to sell ourselves out, is to do what we know is wrong, because we all came fully equipped on this planet with a conscience, okay? Yeah, you can drink the crap out of that conscience to the point that you can do things, and yeah, in court you'll even get away with, oh, I was just super drunk or I've out of my mind. This is like a real strong argument in a lawsuit. But the truth is we all know when we're doing wrong, and the ultimate sellout and the ultimate lesson that I'm here to sort of, I guess, share, one of them is to thine own self be true. That's biblical, because the truth, as he said, shall set ye free. Doesn't matter if you're on Alcatraz. Doesn't matter if you're trapped for the rest of your life in a room, like some of these men were. You're more free by the fact that you're free in your own mind and your own being than everyone else out there who's supposedly driving cars and what? You're more free, incarcerated.
Yeah.
That's a metaphor. So in any case, that was a huge lesson, man. But I did end up overcoming that slowly. I was, had to do the Back on Track program and, feeling like a criminal, feeling like an addict. Not to say that I wasn't. I'm a pretty addictive personality, and I think every fire sign can relate. If you have to be moving, it's like, well, this is where I turned my vice into advice, and that's what the whole concept of me flipping the script of ADD and ADHD. You remember at the event,
Yep.
your book release, right? I shared it. I guess I'll just drop them now. The acronyms, guys, get out your pens and papers. These are really good ones. This is how we flip the script with ADD. One who is on an alternate drive and destiny. And then ADHD, possibly that one's attention is dialed in to higher dimensions. So flipping the script and taking that, restlessness and putting it into fitness. Now you have this thing I created called Fit Hop, and I'm teaching this, in schools to kids, and not just kids, but even, high school, even right up to, I've been in, working with geriatrics, like in old seniors homes. Yeah. Because there's an inner child in all of us. It speaks to the inner child because the inner child loves to play and unite and sing and dance. And that's essentially what hip hop culture is based on. The 4 principles of peace, love, unity, and having fun. So Fit Hop then became this modality where I don't have to fit into something. As I say, the new hip is to just try to be fit. And I say, try to be fit. And you don't have to be fit yet. It's a process, and by fit, I don't just mean ripped, like physically, visually, aesthetically. I mean, equipped with this knowledge of this gift that we all have within, the gift of creativity. But it takes the courage, the heart to say, here's me, authentically.
Mm. And was Fit Hop specifically because I know you were already into hip hop culture, after going through your DUI experience, did that have a role to play in your creation of Fit Hop?
Yeah, well, I did want to get into schools really badly. And I actually reached out to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, hoping that I would be able to share my story, because it's such a victorious overcoming that, even after all of that, here I am. I've created this sort of solution through my own healing. I created something that I can help others also heal through it. And they couldn't take me on because of, I can't remember, she explained it, but there was a certain period of time, I guess it's like a pardon, within which they cannot take someone until I got to look back and see, maybe it's past that time, allotted time now, but it really, it hurt because I couldn't get into the schools through Mothers Against Drunk Driving. But you know what that did? That only just was another challenge for me to get more creative, because that's all the challenge is forcing us to get more creative, nonlinear, outside the box, right? And I just ended up going directly myself into the educational system, first by just context that I had to do a couple of beta testing of how would I show up? How would this look? Because I still didn't really know what it was going to be, other than me, like they do when Mother Against Drunk Driving candidates go and have a speech and a PowerPoint presentation. But anyways, I went in, I had a contact, I did a Fit Hop workshop or 2, and 2 days, 2 full days of them. And I had enough to then apply to the government, to the TDSB, and become a board approved educational partner. And it was cool because it happened within 8 months or something. Apparently it's a long process, but they really expedited mine because they're like Fit Hop. They really liked the creativity, the twist on it. It's an integration. Here's the abbreviation. It's a functional, and I capitalize FUN because we put the fun in functional, a functional integrative, so bringing together multiple disciplines, training and health optimizing program. So bringing in all the different, ancient, modern, Eastern, Western, everything, and bringing it in disseminating it through music, which is that universal language that it actually lands. Kids actually listen, because when I speak to you in RAM, you actually listen due to a biological mechanism called pattern recognition. It's an active intuition processed with pure precision. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You start tuning in, because it's where's this going?
Yeah. And so with Fit Hop, I know you've been doing a lot of stuff with young kids, and you were just in Denmark, right?
Belgium.
And you met, Belgium. And I saw the pictures and it looked amazing. I think you were even in touch with the mayors, which is pretty cool.
Yes, we got some great feedback, publicity, and Yeah, we're making some noise out there in Belgium, specifically because Belgium is a very progressive country, and I have a good contact out there who's the principal of their newest, latest, greatest technologically advanced school, where you got like stools that are like wobbly. Why? Because kids who are bored, rather than have a fidgety stick, they can just kind of wobble around. And we've learned psychologically that just moving allows that busy mind to focus.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
if we were to circle, I think that's super cool. So great to see all those kids around you and Phil. If you were to create something, because if we were to tie it back into the criminal justice system, if you were to create a program, FitHop, and bring it into prisons and jails in Canada, what would that look like? What do you think that would do for people who are incarcerated?
Oh man, I think it would liberate their, not only their creativity, which is what it's essentially doing in the schools, but it would liberate their spirit, especially when they hear it, like the lyric that I would be sharing on that level, because I can relate to those incarcerated souls who feel forever the self-condemnation, you know what I mean? That it's just an infinite, like eternal perpetuation that I am flawed and defective as a human being. I think what it would look like would be a lot more personal, a lot more like of the spoken word that I can really land now, like the messaging landing, because with, let's be honest, in the school, like there's political correctness and stuff. I gotta watch what I'm saying. And of course, discretion. And if I'm working with kids, I'm not gonna go deep. But like in the correctional facilities, I feel like I could really come fully, clean, and just really like confess my confession and in my expression, and show them that, like you, I too have been there, and I'm still there. We're always there. Let's not pretend like you just jump over one hurdle and the race is over, man. It's like there's many hurdles.
Yeah.
It's the process, But how it would look is very much like what a FitHop edutainment workshop looks like, except more advanced content, more real, getting to the real, why are we addicted, and it would be a discussion, but it would also be an invitation for their expression, which would yield, just like in a hip hop cipher where you have everyone on the street, on the block, and they're all just, freestyling. Instead of freestyling about like, whose ghetto is better, or, who shot more people, whatever, it would be like this cipher of all of them, just like they do at a circle, in the 12-step program, being able to share their story, but in a lot more of an inspired, artistic way, you know what I mean? And therefore using metaphors, and because to come straight out literally directly and say something, not everyone's ready for that. But when you inspire them to say it in a lyrical way, express it, with their body as a movement, as a dance, and it's just, I feel like that's where FitHop would be like. Now, instead of just for kids, you get to see it really done in a forum that's going to allow people to get very humble, get very real, and not feel any sense of judgment, and totally in the process.
Yeah, I see a lot of healing through that. And, flip the script. Our program is called From the Streets to the Stage. And now we even say to the studio, because guys that have their stories, they're saying, okay, well, how can I turn this into music? One guy loves guitar. Another guy's like, how can I put this into rap? And I know you and I briefly had talked about this, but there's so much more expression that can happen and healing through that. Like other people do it through theater and music. So I think it would be a beautiful project to take on and explore the avenue.
It's crazy when you say the streets to stages. Like in one of the video promos I'd once assembled back in the day, I called it From the Studios to the Schools to the Streets to the Stage.
No way.
Those are the 3 S's, and I'm always like, me and the S, like Spartan Productions, right? That's the whole. So those are the 4, from this, and I feel like, Director X's, right? The Toronto, he's also, he's got an initiative, and he's doing big things in the same way, because like, it's not just about the schools and the kids, but it's about, the correctional facilities, and and it's about all of society. We don't make it unless we all make it.
Yeah.
We all make it. And that's a really important one to get as a human being, because we are all one family, humanity. And no one's going to get it unless we all get it.
I'm glad you brought that up about Director X, because he is Canadian and he has Operation Prefrontal Cortex and brings meditation to schools, and he's looking to bring that into correctional facilities here. I was actually in touch with his team to be on here today, and they've just been so short-staffed that they haven't been able to coordinate something. So I think that it's great that you bring him up. The last few minutes that we have, Tarek's been messaging me and he says he can come on. I think he is on as a
nice
attendee, so he can share the video. Before he does that, actually, Aaron, I don't know if you can bring Tarek on. I don't know if he's under his name there. If you can just share what inspired you to make, and Tarek as well, to make Power, which is
Power, yeah. That whole concept, initially Power was it was the name of my first album. It's the title track of my first album, which I released in 2013. And the whole idea was, I got power, so much of it, so beautiful, so infinite. I got power, so much of it, so beautiful. Why? Because it comes from within. The whole concept of that song was claiming the power that you have here. Again, look into the direction of that which you most fear. That is why you're here. And the power is not something you acquire outside of you or attain. It's something that you claim. And that song Power was about saying, no matter where I am, even if it, like I said, if it was on Alcatraz, I have power and infinite amounts of power because I'm tuned in, I'm tapped in. So Tarek then, he was so inspired by the song. He wrote a couple verses on it and inspired me back. That's the beautiful thing about art and inspiration. It's like this ping pong effect of like every time it gets higher and higher. And Tarek brought some verses that he had written for the song, and he asked, "Hey man, would you be open to doing a derivative?" And I said, "Sure." Like my part of Spartan Productions, my whole label and philosophy was there ain't no creation like collaboration, and therefore this became kind of Power 2.0, version 2.0. And it was a fun project, man. Yeah, Tarek just selected like one of the most epic beats, and I said, yeah, let's do it. We recorded it.
Well,
Here it is.
let's hear this. Tarek, I'm trying to get you on, unless Aaron, are you still there? Aaron, can you bring Tarek on? You can see him in there.
Yeah, I see him right there.
Perfect. Which is awesome, because I was saying Tarek couldn't join us because he's in New Zealand. So it was great that he's been able to tune in. There he is.
Nice.
There you are.
Namaste, beautiful soul tribe. Oh my God.
Appreciate you being here all the way in New Zealand.
Yes.
Thank you,
What time is it
Jessica.
there?
Nice to see you, Pico.
Yes, likewise, brother.
Happy Day of Empathy.
Happy Day of Empathy. So listen, we only have a few minutes left, so we have enough time to share the music video. Are you able to share your screen?
Yes, give me 1 second.
And while you're doing that, Tarek, is there anything you want to add in terms of what inspired you to be a part of Power and the creation behind it?
I'm all over what you guys are doing. It's a soft space, soft place in my heart where people feel invisible, ignored, powerless, and to have someone who's not directly connected to that care about them and try to help them is huge. And the number of people that are falsely, like, people say this all the time, oh, that person has a dark side. Who doesn't make mistakes? And it's not fair that certain people mess up once and then they're messed up for life. So I really love what you're doing, and I'm glad I get to be a part of it, and we need more of that, and you're a hero to many. And yeah, this is maybe just a calling to what else can we do to make a difference to those in play, who don't have the freedom to make a difference.
I appreciate that. And at the end, there is a link. I don't know if you have it on the video, or maybe we can get it posted in the chat after, but there's a link to support Flip the Script, which is the organization I run, and our programs to expand it to more rehabilitation centers and correctional facilities to work with guys who are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, to help them share their story and reclaim their power, heal, and live on purpose. So Tarek, whenever you're ready, we're ready for the release.
All right, let's do this. So in the video, in the healing of the video, there is an activation just there in the background to help us take our power back, to activate the power chakra, which is also called the Manipura, which just helps us take our power back, use our power for good, to make a difference in the world. So I'm excited for you guys to experience that. And the video is beautiful, and the call to action is at the end with Jessica, me, and Nico, and just honored to be a part of it. Let's take it. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if that works, and I'll play it from my end.
Cool. And we all look cold in there.
Yeah, actually, we disguised it pretty well. Good acting.
I remember my lips couldn't keep up with the words in the song.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right. Do you guys see my screen?
Yep.
I see it.
Okay.
Here we go.
And there's no volume.
Join audio tray.
Are you guys able to do it from your end?
Aaron, are we able to do something? I'm not sure. Wait.
I can send you the video link, Jessica.
Wait, it's playing on Facebook, so it's just slower on Zoom.
Can you post the link in the chat? And then I don't know if Aaron, if you can play it.
Let's see if I can.
I'd say, I mean, because you're gonna have, of course, like the digital delay and stuff like that. It's like gonna be choppy with buffering and all. But I mean, the main thing is that the link is there. It is active and online, right? It's available to the public now.
Yeah.
So
We
I mean,
just
that's
launched
the
it.
best thing. Yeah, I was gonna ask you. I'd like to hear too from you, Tarek. When Jessica asked, like, what inspired you to write like power? What specifically like made you bring your verses to life?
Sorry, you said.
Yeah, like talk a little bit more. Speak to more to like what made you, after hearing the song "Power," relate it to then what you wrote to it. You know what I mean? To like, because it's interesting how it went from me making it just a song on my album, then you turn it into a derivative, then Jessica sees it as like, whoa, this is an anthem, and this kind of all just boom, 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 boom became the Day of Empathy. Here we are, here and now.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Vipassana, so it was 10 days, and it's like you give up all your stuff as soon as you get there, and you're kind of stuck in a place with just meditating all day, and the words just kind of came through. Interesting when I was confined, it's like quarantine right now everywhere, and interesting with, like there's almost like we're all kind of imprisoned in our cells in a way, and that was my experience in Vipassana. Wow. And I just have these words kind of come through. I didn't think about it, it just came through, and it was like, what is true power? And on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, it's like there's the aggressive power where you just want more power from an ego place, but then there's also that other power that we see, like people like Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, like all these people who use that divine power to then make a difference. And to me, that's what the message is in the song that you created, that I've been blessed to be able to add my version to it. And then
that's so cool, man. You were in Vipassana. So
yeah,
it's so cool though. Yeah, like, and that's what's happening right now. It's interesting, and the parallels there is uncanny.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate you sharing. We got to wrap up here. Tarek, I want to do a last acknowledgement there, because it was funny. You didn't know that Marley, I was trying to get in touch with Marley, who was our first interviewee this today, and you were like, hey, you guys got to connect. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been trying to get a hold of this other Canadian, a part of Cut 50. So, you know, there's no coincidences. So thank you for being that tie-in. I appreciate, Nico, you coming on and sharing your experience.
Pleasure.
Mark, I appreciate you guys. The people that are watching, the music video is in the chat. The link for the YouTube is there, and please check it out. It's awesome. That was shot, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago or something like that.
Oh,
I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for being on.
a pleasure.
Jessica, can I share a quick prayer?
Yes.
All right. Please, God, Source, Universe, connect to us right now, everyone listening, and infuse into our beings all the love, all that is needed into our beings, and allow it to spread into every cell in our body. And just visualize every cell in our body shining like the sun, radiating in all directions. Let it spread into our ancestral lineage. Let it spread into our future generations. Let it spread into the city that we're in, the country that we're in, the planet that we're in, all beings everywhere. And let it spread into our planet and help her raise the vibration higher and higher and higher. Let love be above all else. Let love conquer. Let love spread its power, its rays of divinity in all directions, now and forever, from now until eternity. And let's bring this place back into heaven on earth. Let's bring our beings back into that divine blueprint the way it was meant to be. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen.
Amen. So it is.
Thank you.
I
Welcome.
bless you guys. To be continued. Much love.
Connect soon.
Peace.
Signing out. Peace.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move on here. So I'm going to share a bit of my story. And like I said, check out the music video if you can. And then at the top of the hour, we're going to bring on Senator Kim Pate, which I see her there waiting. And that is exciting. I'm glad that she could make it. So for me, let me take a, I think I'm going to have to take a bathroom break soon. Let me take a sip of water here. Aaron, if I run to the bathroom, I might need you to give people a show. Okay.
I got you covered.
Perfect. So for me, I said during this time of my share, I would share my experience. And this is, I mean, besides my book, sharing the first time publicly about me getting married in prison and building a relationship behind bars, and what people can do to lower stress if they have someone who's incarcerated, not just for themselves, but also for the people who are incarcerated. So I got married at 18. Actually, a little bit rewind. At 17, he was incarcerated. We were not even together at the time, 2 weeks after we met. And so he was sitting in a remand, and he was there for a few years, not even, no trial, nothing, just sitting in remand. And the conditions were so horrible in the place that he was at. And it's good now that they've shut down that place because of it was just an inhumane place to be. So he pled out, and he was in a federal penitentiary in Canada. And then he was 7 years older than me. And then at 18, 6 months. Yeah. So I turned 18 in December, and then the following summer, so about 6 months later. So we got married in prison. And now I can, I make this joke where anyone, hey, ladies, gentlemen, there's hope for anyone, because you just need a lawyer, a justice of the peace, someone else who's incarcerated as your witness, and your bride or groom, and you're good to go. So that's what I had. And today, if you look at my Facebook and Instagram, I showed a picture from that day when I was 18 and got married, which is a little bit crazy to see, because that was 20 years ago. Yeah, that was in 2000. So, I had this experience of building a relationship behind bars, and it's refreshing to have this day again, because I can share this without feeling like people are going to be like, what? Like, why would you marry someone like that and do something so crazy? Not that it's a normal thing, but I want to share my experience, because there are people that go through this. There are spouses that have, you know, for every person that's incarcerated, there's a spouse or a partner, you know, a mother, a father, a brother, sister, son, daughter that's out there. And so for me, it was very challenging. I remember I was living in Edmonton at the time, and I would take a Greyhound bus and take the bus down to Drumheller institution, and we would have, you know, regular visits. And you know, even starting from remand, like I would have visits with him, and that's how we started to get closer, and got married in the morning about 9 o'clock. And then we had our conjugal visit and conceived our first child when we were inside. And through the years, I built that relationship with him. Like, he was in and out a couple of times. Definitely very challenging. I mean, added to what I was going through, it was an abusive relationship. There were a lot of great times, and at the same time, it was very stressful. And I did my best that I could at the time to support him. You know, I remember him calling and, you know, saying like, I miss my music, especially when he was in remand and he couldn't have his stuff. And so I would turn on, like, he had like stacks of CDs, and he would tell me which ones to go to HMV, which is our big Canadian store that we had. And he told me which CDs to get. So it was usually DMX, it was usually Jay-Z, it was usually Nas, and I mean, he had a whole host of other things. And he'd tell me to put it on the speaker, blast it as loud as I could, and then hold up the phone. And sometimes I'd actually fall asleep because I'd be holding the phone so long. And that was one of the ways that, you know, I would help him pass the time. You know, and that brings me to one of the points of like how to support someone who is incarcerated. And one of the things is like to ask them, how can I best support you? Because you may be surprised if you don't have those conversations. You know, you might have heard about the different love languages, right? How we want to be supported and loved may not be the same way someone else does. So ask them, like, how do you want to be supported? So, I mean, it was great in that he told me what he wanted. And, you know, again, for us, one of the ways was playing him his music and going to visit him. Yes, I had spent a lot of money on Greyhound tickets and hotels, but that's, you know, we did what we had to do. So asking your loved one how they feel best supported makes a huge difference, because they're going through so much stress in their environment as well, like a lot of survival based stuff. And, you know, parole could be coming up, you know, a court date, like there's so much inside stress. So as much as you can do to be supportive, as well, encouragement. So to keep encouraging them. And I have people say, you know, like, I want so-and-so to transform and change their life, but you know, it's frustrating and it really hurts because they're not seeing it and they're not changing. And, you know, we know that we can't change people, right? We know that. So I tell people, like, I had a friend that said, you know, my daughter, please, can you help her? Because she's going through stuff. She's 16, 17 years old and she's hanging around with these guys and this guy's abusive. What can I tell her? And I go, you know what? There's nothing you can say. And I know that sucks to hear, but until that person is ready, they're not going to make that shift. You couldn't tell me anything. Anything would just go in one ear and out the other until I was ready to transform. So to keep pouring on the love, to keep being the love, keep encouraging. You know, when I sign my books these days, I put love always wins. I really believe that. And it might sound corny in some ways about all this like love stuff. And, you know, someone said, oh yeah, in an ideal world, we lead with love and compassion. But why not? Why not? Like, to me, that's love does always win. And, you know, in these kind of circumstances, being a demonstration of love as much as possible and understanding that how they react is the highest level of love that they can express in the moment. Accepting that, and also we touched on this earlier, accepting one's spiritual journey. Like, they are a soul on their own journey, just like you and I are. So who are we to judge them? I wrote some other things here so I don't forget. Compassion also is, for their experience and what they're going through. Yes. For yourself, a lot of self-care, like if you're a spouse, or if you have your parent or even a child is incarcerated, a lot of self-care, because it's easy to get stressed over things and have things fall apart around you. I found that self-care was really important. So for me, fitness is a big thing. I know even when my husband was out, health became the thing that I could hang on to, that no one could take away. So I would go to the gym 3, 4, 5 times, sometimes 6 times a week, because I felt good. And that helped me deal with any kind of stress I was dealing with and raising children. And like I said, no one can take that time away from me. I had spent a lot of time alone, locked in an apartment, isolated from family and friends, couldn't go anywhere. So I found an outlet through poetry. Poetry saved me during my early years, and that became an outlet for me to just express whatever I was going through. So creative outlets. I didn't meditate back then, but meditation can help if you're not a meditator. Any kind of quiet time for yourself and your mind is also really great. Just so that you can ground and deal with whatever is going around you, right? Like now we're all kind of quarantined in our homes, and with all of this COVID stuff going on, and you can just like that, you can give into the fear really easily, or just go, you know what, I refuse to let that get to me, and let me go inward and see how much I can come from a place of faith and love instead of fear and stress. So those are the things that I wanted to mention there. And if you have questions for me, I see a few of you on there. Please do. Erin, you're awesome. You already beat me to it. I just saw that. I think that's pretty much it for that. Is Kim on, or is she? I think she might have jumped off. Erin, do you see her on there? I'm hoping Erin's there. Okay, maybe he's not. Okay, so Erin, if you are there, or if you can hear me, let me know, because I would love to do a quick bathroom run before Kim comes on. And in the meantime, you know what, guys, it's really, maybe you've experienced this before. It's a little bit awkward talking to like a blank screen, knowing people are there, but I have no feedback. So, but I know people are there. Yeah, and then so after Kim, we have Greg McInnes coming on, and I want to pull this up because I had some people have questions for the senator, and I want to make sure that that gets addressed. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pull that up on my page here on Facebook. 1 second. Maybe just scroll through. Aw, thanks, Amy. Amy says, you're doing great. Love always wins. Yes, it does. Angela and Karen, I'm giving you guys big hugs. I can feel your hugs back. One sec, guys. I want to make sure I address a question for the senator. Questions. Erin, are you there yet?
Yes, I am here.
Perfect. I'm gonna look for these questions and run quickly to the bathroom before the senator comes on. Would you
Awesome.
mind putting on a show, doing what you need to do?
Maybe I'll dance or something, or maybe not. Yeah, go ahead. I got you covered. Awesome. Okay, so let's check and see if there's any questions in the Q&A. This would be a great time if someone had a question in general, something I can assist with. If you do the hand raising thing inside of the chat, I'll see that. If Greg, if you want to chime in right here, this is also a good time. Scanning. You guys are an easy crowd. I'm going to scroll up and see if I see some questions earlier. Okay, Greg, you're trying to find it on Facebook. Let me do this. Hey, Greg, can you hear me? Greg, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So you're trying to find the link on Facebook. If you go to the Facebook page and you scroll down, you can see the link for the live video that's going on now.
I see the Day of Empathy. I don't see a live link. Maybe I don't go down far enough.
Yeah, keep going. It's past the event.
Oh, I see there. I see you. Oh, okay.
That's it. So the easiest way is if you take that and you share the page, it's where people go to post first.
Sorry, what's that again?
If you see right underneath the video, it says
Yeah.
comments and then shares.
Yeah.
If you click the little arrow that says share, you can share it on your Facebook page, your groups, or whatever you have access to. That's probably the quickest way to share it via Facebook.
Start a watch party. Is that what I'm doing?
You can do that. I've got
or
that.
Or just share it.
Yeah, or you can just share it. Either one, correct.
Share it now. Okay. That's even easier.
Perfect.
Thank you. Sorry, that seemed to be more challenging.
It's supposed to be simple, but Jessica and I are finding out today that occasionally it's not as simple as we like.
Yes. Technology. Okay, so we're waiting for Kim to come back on. I know I saw her name pop in a couple of times.
I did see it as well. I think she was just watching for a second. We'll give her a minute to jump back on.
We might have to play by ear because she has been sitting in the Senate all day, and I don't know if it's one of those situations where she's kind of pulled in and out.
I wonder if they have a live feed or.
Sending a message to her team. So if you guys have a question for Senator Kim Pate, please put it in the chat so we can address it and save some time. She is a senator. She's based in Ottawa. We're very honored to have her, and she is a huge advocate for criminal justice reform here. Particularly, her passion is with Indigenous women's issues and universal basic income. And through UBI, that's originally how I connected with her to see what we can do for people who are incarcerated. Don't see her. Okay, not sure what happened yet. We'll give her a little bit of time. Otherwise, Greg will bring you on a bit earlier if you're okay with that, since you're here already. So let's give her this opportunity in case she was pulled back.
Oh, Amy, did you have your hand raised for a question, or is that from earlier?
Hey, Amy, did you have a question? Or if you do, take yourself off mute.
Okay, I'll leave it there for a second, but we're gonna assume she's okay.
Okay, so her team member said he's not with her. So I guess that was Kim directly on there. I just don't know what happened. Greg, if you can hear me, if we had to bring you on, are you okay coming on early? Sure, Angela. So 4 o'clock is supposed to be Senator Kim Pate, and then 4:45 is Greg McGinnis from the Salvation Army, and then we have a break, and then at 7 o'clock we have Brian Saund coming on sharing about his experience being incarcerated in the UK, his path to the spiritual transformation, and how his incarceration is still impacting him today, decades later in Canada. And then we have Dennis, who's our last interviewee of the day. And he's going to be sharing about being locked up at 16 for 10 years in Canada. He just won a lawsuit against the government for that. So, and they're trying to appeal it now. So he'll be sharing his experience and as well his spiritual transformation. And then there's a bit of a time gap as well between those two speakers. So if anyone has questions or wants to come on and just, share their experience, I'm open to having that as well. Greg, you're on. Are you good with doing your thing now?
Sure, I can. I'm just wrestling with the technology, trying to get people to know when I'm on and how to get there. But
okay, actually, sorry, Greg. So Kim just popped on there, so we're gonna switch you.
Okay, perfect. No, I can wait.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Greg.
Okay.
Hey, Kim.
Okay, now I'm back on at 4:45. The guests arrived.
Oh. Kim, can you hear me? Kim, I don't know if you can hear me, but I can see you, and I know that you're not on mute.
She may have her speaker just turned down. She's not on mute. The video is working.
Are you able to send her a message, seeing if she can see that?
Yeah, let's see. I think she recognized it, so she's looking at it now.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Hey, okay.
There you are, Kim.
Excellent.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Good. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. And I just finished reading your book. Fantastic.
You did. And what'd you get out of it? How was it?
Well, I think it's an incredible what you're doing now. And I'm very pleased that you're doing all of this, because what you've lived through is unfortunately the story of far too many people, and far too few end up being able to live to tell the tale.
I appreciate that. You're a fast reader.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being on. I know you've been in the Senate today, so I appreciate you still making time for Day of Empathy.
Oh, it's even more important than ever, given what we're dealing with in the world right now.
Yes, definitely. So we have a couple questions that were sent on Facebook for you ahead of time. So we'll get to that. So what I shared earlier today, I don't know how much you got to tune in, but I was sharing how you are a criminal justice reform advocate here in Canada, and your passion is around Indigenous women's issues and universal basic income. So I'd love to focus our interview around that.
Okay.
And so I'm curious, how if we can rewind a bit first, how did you get into criminal justice reform?
Well, I didn't intend to do this when I first started out, certainly not when I went to law school. I decided when I was fairly young, apparently, I told my parents I was going to be a lawyer, and my purpose in doing that was no altruistic, great social justice, any kind of impetus. It was really, I thought it was one way that I could make money and help to support my family as I move forward. And so because I am fortunate to be the first in my immediate family to get a university education, I don't take that lightly. I know that it's not accidental. I had many more opportunities than even my own siblings had, my 3 younger sisters. And so it was through the process of doing that, getting that education, getting exposed to different groups and individuals and ideas at university. And then when I was at law school, working in the legal aid clinic that was attached to the law school, I was in Halifax at Dalhousie at the university, and saw that predominantly there were a lot of people who do things wrong. We know that by the age of majority, virtually every one of us has done something for which we could be criminalized if there was a will, if there were people monitoring us, depending on who we did it to, whether we would be prosecuted. Well, we know most of us aren't, because we have a level of privilege and opportunity that we don't end up in that situation. So when I started working at the clinic, I noticed that I was one of the few people who wanted to work with young people, and many people found them challenging. I had trained as a teacher before law school, partly just to make, to be able to afford to go to law school. So I really enjoyed adolescence. But what I saw was almost all of the kids ending up in custody were young people who were poor, who were in the child welfare system already, so had often experienced trauma, abuse, neglect. And almost all of them were racialized. And so that it gave me a very different picture than what I had been raised with, which is, the law applies equally to all of us. If you do the crime, you do the time, all of those sort of cliches or adages that we're often raised with. And what you realize fairly quickly is that, in fact, the law doesn't apply equally to everybody, because if you have greater opportunity, you're less likely to find yourself in the situation where you're being marginalized, victimized, criminalized, or institutionalized, particularly in prison.
Mm. And I'm sure that's how it's led you to work with indigenous women and the issues that they're facing, right? Because it's something like a third of the population here in Canada that's incarcerated is of Indigenous background.
Right, it's about a third for all people. It's even higher if you look at young people, even higher if you look at young women. And if you look at women alone in the federal system, which is where in Canada, if you're serving a sentence of less than 2 years, you're in a provincial or territorial jail. If you're serving a sentence of more than 2 years, you're in a federal prison. And 42% of women serving federal sentences are Indigenous in this country, even though they represent about 3% of the population. And then I was just recently, and I'm still working on a case involving a young woman in Saskatchewan, and there are 98% of the girls in custody are Indigenous. I mean, those are horrific statistics. And more importantly, there are people who go, they're not just statistics, there are people. And so I've been trying to take senators into prisons. Some joke, not the way some people thought they might be going, but we're going into prisons. And one of the first things many people are saying is, this could be my mother, my aunt, my brother, my uncle, basically it's the people who are homeless, it's the people who are struggling, it's the people who have past trauma, it's the people who are anesthetizing themselves with drugs or alcohol to deal with that past trauma and homelessness and poverty. And then the people who have greater opportunities often don't end up serving prison sentences. They often end up in the community if they're charged at all.
You're right. And I'm curious, when you bring in other senators and other colleagues, what's their reaction like? Because I know that you're a criminal justice reform advocate. Not everybody is. So how do they receive all of this?
Well, it's interesting. In the day that we're recognizing is in terms of empathy, I'll never forget one of the senators who came into one of the maximum security prisons with us. There was a group of, I think, 5 or 6 of us senators. And as we were leaving, he said, I never, you know, he was a businessman before he came to the Senate. He'd never been in a penitentiary before he went. He actually came to, I think he's come to 2 so far with us. And he said, I never thought I would feel empathy for someone who had killed someone or raped someone or who had done such heinous things. And it's not that he felt, you know, sympathy, it was empathy that the life that individuals had been dealt didn't excuse their behavior. You know, it's not a case of saying, you know, we think it's okay what he did, but the fact that the idea that this man had now spent 40 years in prison, and recognizing how whatever damage started there, whatever he had contributed to in terms of harm to other people, there was no benefit coming from the extended period of putting him in ever more isolating, ever more disintegrating conditions, which is basically the situation this man was in. He was old, he's older. I mean, he's one of the people that we think about right now as the COVID-19 epidemic is, or pandemic is going around the globe. And many of us are looking at the populations that are most vulnerable. And one of those populations, it's not the only one, but one of them is certainly the prison population, where the ability to physically distance yourself, to use hygiene products, to follow all of the steps that we are being told to follow, those of us who are in the community, are not necessarily available to them in prison. And that the main form of isolating people is to lock them down and to put them in solitary confinement, which we know has a whole host of other issues that, in terms of problems it creates, not the least of which the health issues.
And let's talk about the COVID situation right now, because it's a huge topic, particularly in the States. I'm hearing a lot of things. One of the guys who's incarcerated, it, you know, broke my heart, because he said he's afraid that he's going to die before he's released because of the virus coming in. And, you know, in California, that was one of the guys in there. He was tested positive for it. So what are they doing? What's happening in Canada? Like, is there any policy to release nonviolent offenders, or what's being in place for this?
Well, and we were just discussing this in the Senate this morning. And in fact, to my pleasure and surprise, because there hadn't been much movement up until the last day or so, the minister responsible for public safety in this country said that they are looking at releasing options. In addition, in provincial and territorial, some of the regions of Canada, different provinces and territories, much like what's happening in the United States and other parts of the world, some states are looking at release options. But one of the things we've been promoting is that we should be looking at really an approach that is pan-Canadian, if you will, in the sense that provinces, territories, municipalities, as well as the federal government engage in a process of releasing those who do not pose a risk to public safety, so that we can at the very least free up space within existing prisons to provide an option for that kind of, for some of the other measures that are required for health reasons. And one of the senators who spoke to that today said that when people are sentenced, they're not or when they're detained awaiting trial, because we have many, many people who are in prison throughout the world who are awaiting trial who haven't even been sentenced, that they are not sent there to die, that they're sent there as a penalty for whatever harm they're perceived to or they're convicted of having been part of. And that the expectation is, at least in Canada, and I know it's not necessarily the case for far too many prisoners in the United States and other countries, but in Canada there are only 17 men who will never ever see the light of day, because they're still serving multiple parole and eligibility periods for multiple life sentences. Up until those provisions were brought in Canada a few years ago, every single person at least had the hope that if they did all of the things they're expected to do or held accountable, that they might at some point be released on parole. That's a situation where we have increasing numbers of people in Canada. 1 in 4 of the individuals in federal penitentiaries are considered elderly. We see 1 in 7 have significant breathing issues. We still have people with tuberculosis in our prisons, and certainly up north in some communities we have it as well. We have many, many people with diabetes and heart conditions and other compromised health situations. And less people think it's just, you, me, a handful of people think this is a good idea. In the mid-90s in Canada, all of the men, it was all men at that time who were in charge of corrections in the country, said that they could release at that time 75% of the people then in prison and not increase risk to public safety. Knowing that, we're not talking about increasing public safety risk, which is what people first often think of and are fearful of, rightly so, but we're actually talking about releasing people who most everybody recognizes do not pose a risk to public safety, and really saying, what else could they be doing in the community? How could they be caring for their own loved ones, whether it's their children, their parents, others in the community? How could they be contributing? I just, on the way back from the Senate to this office, I ran into someone who used to work at corrections, and she said, why aren't we allowing people to come out and work in the community? There are so many people I know who are serving sentences who, given the opportunity, even in a structured, supervised work release situation, would come out and build the homes, build the testing centers, that build the infrastructure that we need, not just in this country, but of course throughout the world right now. And so there are all kinds of ways that we could be doing this that would actually benefit all of us, not just those individuals who are in prison.
Totally. And so how fast is this topic moving? Because we can talk about it and you guys meet in the Senate, but how fast, you know, given the circumstances, can things be implemented?
Very good question. The minister today who's responsible said that he has asked for ideas from the head of corrections in this country, as well as the head of the parole board, and that he will be pursuing those options. So from my perspective, there are many people right now awaiting release. There are many people who judges and Crown prosecutors could be exercising their discretion to say, all of you people who are currently in a waiting trial, if you have places to go and communities that will support you, out you go. Certainly those serving intermittent sentences, often referred to as weekends. Already a number of provinces have said those individuals who are serving intermittent sentences can and should be being released, and so they're serving their sentences under house arrest. There should be no question of public safety there, because if they were considered a risk to public safety, they wouldn't have been granted an intermittent sentence in the first place. And so those are starts, but we could be looking at other measures. We have in Canada what's called the Royal Prerogative of Mercy, which allows the Minister of Public Safety to recommend to the Governor General people being released either temporarily or permanently from their sentence. And so those are other options that could be being looked at for those who are elderly, old. I mean, imagine the situation in prisons in this country and around the world, where you have people who have mental health issues, who have intellectual disabilities, who have even dementia. I mean, my mom has dementia. I cannot imagine her fully understanding how to use all of the distancing, the hygiene instructions we're being given, how to say, you know, convince her that she has to stay just in one place and that she can't walk around and visit with people. And yet that's the situation for some of the people who are in prison as well. So it really behooves us to develop these mechanisms very quickly, get people out and into the community. And for those who are on the street, we should be looking at similar approaches. For those who are struggling, we're hearing lots, and you know full well this story of women trying to flee violence. And what does it do to say to everybody, you have to stay home when you're a woman who's experiencing violence and abuse? And so right now, the Canadian government has shored up resources for homeless shelters, for battered women's shelters, for rape crisis centers and the like. And so it's not going to happen overnight, but certainly it is starting to happen right now, and it needs to be exponentially increased, because we know that the epidemic, the pandemic, is actually, we're nowhere near the peak of it yet. And this idea of flattening the curve, to flatten the number of people who require medical attention so that it doesn't break our medical systems, is vitally important. So we are, you know, many of us believe that we have to do even more than we're already doing, but that there's a huge will amongst the Canadians, amongst people around the world, to do something very different.
It's great to hear that you guys are talking about this in the Senate, you know, given this time and seeing how important it is. What about for the people who are incarcerated and they might not be one of those people who are going to be released anytime soon? What does the government have in place to protect them?
Well, we're told that they have released information about how to protect themselves. I'm also being told of my family members and getting calls from prisons that in fact that information is not getting to many prisoners, and staff are already concerned about what happens if they contract the disease, or if the disease gets into the prisons, because people we know from past tuberculosis outbreaks, HN1, not so much SARS, but certainly when there have been flu epidemics, how quickly they have spread through the prisons. And we know that not just from the prisons, but also what happened on the cruise ships. The attempts to quarantine cruise ships just led to an incubating of the virus within that setting, and many more people being exposed than needed to be. So right now, that's part of the reason, the push to get as many people as can be out, so that those who the system will not release, whether it's because of their sentence, the seriousness, the danger they're perceived to pose to the rest of society, that they can actually be put in a place of physical distancing that doesn't require them just being locked in a cell 24 hours a day.
Right. Great. Let's move to, I want to talk about the Indigenous women's issues, because Day of Empathy, as you know, this is the 4th annual one that's happening, first time ever in Canada. And so we might have some Americans that are tuning in as well. So I'd love to shed, and even just the general public here in Canada, if you can shed some light on what are main issues that they're dealing with and what you are addressing.
Well, in Canada, a little known fact to many people outside of Canada, and sometimes sadly even in Canada, is that we have, I'm not sure the exact number now, but at one point we had as many as a third of the reserve, the on-reserve populations of Indigenous people, which are essentially where the first prisons were that Indigenous people were sent. They were often, their land was stolen. They were sent to a certain patch of land and told to stay there. And if they left, they could be punished. And so they could only leave with the authority of the Indian agent. That was also where children were taken from to be put in residential schools, where which then, as we know, ended up being a pipeline into the child welfare system, which has ended up being a pipeline into the youth criminal legal system, as well as into the adult legal system. And so we have somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of those communities, which when we look at the standard of living of countries, Canada has often been in the top, certainly 5 to 10 countries in the world in terms of standard of living. When we look at just those communities, Canada drops to below most developing countries, which a lot of people don't realize, that in those communities, sometimes in far too many communities still, undrinkable water, inhospitable housing, people in overcrowded, sometimes 3 and 4 families, as many as 20 people living in one dwelling, with inadequate sanitation. So imagine also this COVID pandemic and the virus hitting those communities, which it inevitably will. And that's the reason I was saying, you know, some individuals who are in prison, as well as this woman who I ran into on the street on the way back to my office from the Senate, is saying, why aren't we allowing people to go out and build that infrastructure? And so when you look at a situation where you have the multiplier effects of the inequality of race in terms of indigeneity, when you know that 91% of all of the women in prison who are Indigenous have histories of abuse, 87% of women overall. So you have trauma added to that. You have layered on that inadequate healthcare and supports. And so usually the way to deal with that trauma is to anesthetize yourself with drugs or alcohol, or for someone to try, you know, give you legal drugs to try and anesthetize those realities. So you have built on top of each other poverty, homelessness, addiction, past trauma, racism, and colonial histories of as we know from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Inquiry, the issues that give rise to women being disappeared, murdered, and going missing in this country are directly related to why women end up on the street and in prison. So it's not just that they end up in street, on prison, or dead, but those are all part of the trajectory, which is the intersection of all those areas of discrimination. And so that's the reason that when I start talking about who's in prison, we look at who is the fastest growing prison population. And in Canada, it is Indigenous women, women with mental health issues, poor women, And where you have all of those in one woman, which is, you know, often the situation, then you can just imagine it's a triple, quadruple whammy of discrimination that is very, very difficult to basically. Many of those women end up, many of the Indigenous women have been in prison for very long periods of time with very limited supports to help them get out of that situation. And so, and yet most everybody who deals with them, a woman who was calling me yesterday, who is trying, you know, is on a hunger strike, is trying to kill herself, is one of those women who she's been in over 30 years. I first met her when she was 16 and they were transferring her up from the youth system. You know, most everybody agrees what she really needs is a caring environment, an environment where people care about her in the community, and then likely we'd never see her again. Not because she'd disappear or die, but because she would probably thrive. But she's never really had that opportunity.
Right. And as a senator who is doing things to push things forward, do you feel supported by colleagues? Like, do you have enough people that are like, let's do something about this now? Or do you feel alone in some ways in what you're doing?
Well, when I was first approached, because I had never any plans to be a politician, never any plans to be certainly here in the Senate or anywhere in the government per se. I was working in the voluntary sector with nonprofits and teaching at law schools. But when I was approached, one of the things that struck me about our Senate is our Senate, we are supposed to represent the interest of those who are often voiceless, who are considered quote unquote minority interests in the country. That's what captured my attention, because the last senator of whom I'm aware who was interested in these issues, as particularly those who were incarcerated, was a man named Senator Hastings, Earl Hastings. He died in 1996, so almost you know, not quite to the date, but 20 years before I was appointed. Now, though, we've had over 30 senators go to the prisons. Now, there are 105 senators in Canada. Right now, we're under 100 because we're waiting for new ones to be appointed. But that means that almost a third of senators currently serving in the Senate have gone into prisons. And the result is things like today. Normally, we wouldn't expect, when we're talking about a pandemic and emergency measures being taken and financial measures, to be talking about reducing numbers of prisoners. But it wasn't me who raised that question. It was one of my colleagues who did first. And so there are growing numbers of people interested and concerned about this, and recognizing, as one senator said, who was part of the previous, the Conservative government, when she came into the Senate, I can't believe we need to be thinking of these conditions when we're passing laws. And certainly Louise Arbour, who was at the United Nations, was on our Supreme Court of Canada, did some investigations into situations in prisons here, has said, and I echo what she says. She says that anybody who is involved in enforcing laws or making laws, so whether you're a police officer, whether you're a prosecutor, whether you're a defense counsel, whether you're a judge, or whether you're a member of parliament or a senator, if you do not know the conditions of confinement to which people will be subjected when you're passing laws to put more people in prison, whether it's mandatory minimum penalties or longer penalties or more harsh penalties or limiting parole eligibility or other conditional release options, then you have no business voting on that legislation or being part of that, because you need to know what those conditions are. And I think that is starting to happen. So far, several MPs have come, members of parliament here in Canada have come to the jails as well. More have indicated they're willing to. And so we will continue to do this because in Canada, judges, members of parliament, and senators have a right of access to our federal penitentiaries. And so we have a responsibility to be looking at what's actually happening in our prisons before we pass those laws.
So you're seeing the shift. My question would be, what do you think is the gap between, so there's a lot of dignity issues that people deal with, they're incarcerated. What's the gap between someone who's incarcerated and they're dealing with this, and you know, there's the correctional officers they deal with, and you know, maybe the warden, but then there's this gap of like, how do we get in touch with the government? So that the government knows what's actually happening inside of here?
Right. I think that's a really important question, because too often when the House of Commons or the Senate has looked at these issues, we have a process where our committees do really in-depth studies, and we have witnesses come to Ottawa to testify. One of the differences in the past few years is the Human Rights Committee of the Senate has actually been conducting a study of prisoners, and we're hoping to bring that back. It died on the, or basically died on the papers when Parliament, when the election was called, and we have to bring it back and resurrect it to finish it in the Senate. But we're hoping to finish it because in that process, one of the things we did was go out to prisons. And what we heard from those witnesses who were coming, who were at national headquarters for corrections, was the same thing as we heard often from the wardens and the prison administration when we first entered a prison. But almost invariably, just walking into the prison, going in and meeting with prisoners, going in and meeting with frontline staff, we heard very different stories. And so people who are interested can look on the Senate Standing Committee on Human Rights website. There is a link to the interim report that we did. Stay tuned. Hopefully we'll get the final report done when everything, hopefully when everybody is safe and healthy and we're back at full-time work in the Senate, because we plan to finish that report and get it out to the public, not just Canadians, but certainly for the world to be aware of, because that's the story it told, was a very, very different story on the ground than what you hear when you look at policies or look at law. And in most cases, studies that have been done here in Canada as well as around the world have been those more arm's length studies and haven't involved actually going into the prisons. And what we heard, you know, and many people will be surprised that it wasn't just from prisoners, it was from staff as well, many of the same issues. And in Canada, we've had you know, the exposure recently of the toxic environment that exists amongst some staff in throughout the country. So it won't be a surprise to some Canadians who are hearing this, but it may to some of the folks in the States and elsewhere that actually are a correctional investigator, which acts like an ombuds office for prisoners, as well as the Auditor General of the country, found that in fact there are significant problems about how staff are working together and what the relationship is and what the culture in corrections is. You can only imagine if staff are treating each other in abusive or toxic ways, you can only imagine how that impacts prisoners. And so there is I think a growing awakening, certainly in this country, that we need to do something very different.
So the hope is that this structure would hold the higher ups accountable, right? Because they're telling a different story than what you see on the ground.
Well, I think we still need additional accountability. We saw that with the bill that was supposed to get rid of solitary confinement that was passed last year. Instead, it renamed solitary confinement. And the government, largely led by the bureaucracy, resisted the judicial oversight, the oversight by the courts of corrections. And that was something the Senate tried to impose, the government rejected. And so anybody looking at this area should also look at what the Senate Committee on Social Affairs and Technology, sorry, I have to get the title right, looked at when they looked at a bill called Bill C-83, because a number of recommendations were made by the Senate that I think courts will be looking at, even though the government rejected those amendments. The courts will be looking at. Now, why did the Senate recommend that? And this is the same Senate, of course, that is doing the human rights study. And I think the clear linkages can be drawn by people that the Senate saw what was really happening in the prisons, recommended judicial oversight. The government rejected that, and not a big surprise, it involves people who had actually not been in the prisons and didn't know what was actually happening inside.
Mm. And you touched on something about you know, the frontline workers, right? And you and I had this conversation briefly prior to this call, where I don't know if you got to tune in earlier, but Laurie Lazar was on and she talked about universal basic, sorry, not universal basic income. She talks about authentic relating, and it's a program they do in Colorado prisons. And we talked about how this can benefit frontline workers, correctional officers, police officers, who are walking onto, I gave the example of some friends of mine who are retired officers walking onto scenes, stepping in brains, but not getting support for the trauma that they're just naturally experiencing. And then they're coming in contact with people that they're supposed to be protecting and locking up. So they're like, how do we bring those services to them? Like it kind of blew my mind that, like, what do you mean there's no support for you guys who are police officers at our front line?
Mm-hmm. Well, there certainly needs to be support across the board, I would argue. In most cases, here, many police officers and certainly correctional officers have what they call employee assistance programs. I'm not suggesting they're sufficient, but do provide access to supports so that individuals can get counseling if they need. One of the bigger challenges, I think, often that I hear from whether it's police officers or correctional officers or others working on the front line, is the stigma still that attaches if you're seen to be someone who is seeking that kind of support, that somehow to seek therapeutic support, to seek help is somehow to characterize yourself as weaker than or less than, as opposed to the opposite message, which it should be sending is, it's a tremendous strength to say, look, none of us can deal with everything that gets thrown at us every day. We all have breaking points, and knowing when your breaking point is, or knowing when you're at risk, is really vitally important, and knowing when you need to reach out to other people. Many of us do it spontaneously to friends, family, but we also should be encouraging, I think, and it was what I think is fantastic about what you're doing, and good for you for hosting this, and to all of the folks around who are working on empathy, because I think we should be teaching from very, very young ages, young people to understand and feel empathy for other people, to care about other people, and really to build on the importance of relationships, because we're seeing that now with this pandemic. What's happening is people are reaching out. It's drawing on, you know, in some cases we're seeing negative behavior, but in most cases, what's being amplified is the positive feelings and the efforts that people are making to reach out to each other at a time when we become so focused on electronics and all of these other, gadgets that we have. But now people are in their homes with their loved ones, reaching out to the loved ones they can't see. I mean, I had to set up Skype for my dad, who has never used that before, so that he could talk to my mom, because she's in a home and he can't go visit her every day. And it breaks his heart and mine to know that, every day he would go and visit my mom. Well, people care about that, and the home has helped. Everybody's chipped in. My nephews, my kids everybody's trying to figure out ways, how do we keep, Grampy not getting depressed about not being able to see Nana, and, so I think we need to, really grow the, if something good can come from this, maybe it is that we'll all rethink these sorts of things. So I want to thank you for, you planned this a long time before we knew this reality. This was going to be our reality, but I think it's incredibly important, and I appreciate you including me in it. And it's a huge privilege and humbling honor to have been asked to be part of it.
Oh, my pleasure. And like I said, it's an honor to have you here with us. And the undercurrent that's there for us today with Day of Empathy is, it's about humanity, bringing back humanity and humanizing the system, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And so whether it's the police officers, the correctional officers, the people who are incarcerated, everybody needs to be heard. Everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves to be expressed and heard. And that doesn't separate us. So, these guys, when I hear this with the cop friends, where it's like, you got to put on this front, and like, oh no, we're strong, we can deal with this, we don't want to show any weakness, we don't need that help, even though it might exist. The last thing I want to touch on before I let you go is universal basic income, because I know that that's an area of focus, and that's originally how we connected through Floyd Marinescu, who's heading UBI Works. I've gone in because he asked me to go in and say, like, even if you got $50 a month, what difference would this make in your life, to the guys who are incarcerated? So I know it's been a controversial topic. Where are things now with universal basic income in Canada?
Well, it's interesting that one of the things that the Canadian government has just done is take another couple of incremental steps towards that. And a lot of the discussion around basic income in Canada right now is, this is what we need right now. It could be the temporary measure, or it could be the way to provide what is right now a temporary measure that could have long-lasting impact. I wish I could say that the Minister of Finance responded well to that today when I asked that question, because that was a question I asked in the Senate today. He didn't indicate that they were headed in that direction. And yet, we already have a child benefit. We also already have benefit for seniors that are both of which are essentially types of basic income and guaranteed income. And so we're very hopeful, and certainly there are a number of MPs, some of them in cabinet in Canada, who are very, very keen on this approach. And so we are very, very clearly targeting that this is something we need to be doing. There are also many Indigenous communities who are very keen to see this kind of approach, that they see it as a way to create opportunities for people to learn their culture, to learn their language, instead of languishing in communities looking for non-existent jobs while they're on either employment assistance or social assistance, which is what the rules are in most jurisdictions now, is that you can't get it unless you're looking for a job. Well, if you don't have any jobs in your community, then it's, you know, it's almost nonsensical. But those individuals, if they then go out on the land, or they go and volunteer, or they go and care for their parents or their children, then they're not looking for work every day, and they can be disqualified. So it really is something that I think is, it's the main reason that I actually wanted to be in the Senate, because it's a place that we can work on long-term issues. And our parliamentary budget officer has indicated that, you know, we could pay for this. In fact, the numbers that are coming out about what we're going to be paying out in terms of emergency measures during this health and economic crises that we're experiencing now would actually pay for it. And so one of the things we're looking at and encouraging the government to say is, why don't we use this opportunity to actually embark on something that will provide meaningful change, not just right now for people in this country, but moving forward into the future. And so I'm quite hopeful that there is interest, even if it doesn't happen now, unless I cark it or quit, you know, in the next 15 years. I've got 15 years to work on it, and I'm determined we will see something in the next certainly decades. One of the biggest challenges, and why we haven't seen a government take it on, as the Kroll report, which is a Senate report done 49 years ago, and as Dr. Evelyn Forget, who's an economist here, has said, it would likely take 2 electoral periods, so anywhere from 7 to 10 years, for us to actually see the savings in healthcare, savings in the overall system, savings in terms of the legal system, and the increase in the general benefit for all Canadians. And the problem is, of course, that many elected officials are, you know, they get elected, and then within halfway through the next period of the electoral cycle, they're starting to get ready for the next election. And so few are willing to do something that will benefit potentially another government and not theirs, if they're not pretty confident they'll be in. And so I think we have to change that mindset, and this may be the time that will happen. And so I'm certainly hopeful that we'll see some movement sooner rather than later. Yeah. But if we don't, I'll be on it, you know, in another, hopefully not another 10 years. Hopefully it'll be before then. But if it is 10 years, I'll still be doing it. So,
well, I definitely think now is the time. And would you make people who are incarcerated eligible for the UBI?
Well, I would. I mean, one of the challenges here is one in the, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I should remember, but I don't. You have a young, vibrant mind. Mine is, I have mental pods and things float in and float out. But one of the things that was changed is people can't get senior benefits anymore and can't collect some of those benefits. So they would likely be exempt initially, but my hope would be that we'll also see some more robust efforts to look at, you know, one of the bills I have before the Senate right now is a bill to allow judges to not impose mandatory minimum penalties. So we may see you know, a better approach, and we're hoping we'll have a sentencing or a law reform commission to look at some broader based reforms that might mean people could actually have an opportunity to not just go to prison and be warehoused, or worse still, get worse in prison, but actually, you know, do what one of my colleagues said, why do they call it a correction system if they don't correct anything, if they just basically leave people there and most people get worse? And so if we can actually focus on providing supports, my preference, of course, is to have those supports in the community. And what was planned for the prisons for women 25 years ago in this country was that all programming should be happening in the community, and people are housed, they're incarcerated in the prison, but then they're going into the community and then coming back each day as a way to start that planning for integrating. So there's strong supervision, clear structure, but that dissipates as people are able to contribute to the community. I'm hopeful that we'll see some of those approaches take root as well.
Yes. Well, thank you for being a voice for the people that don't have a voice right now, being a voice for the people who are incarcerated, being a voice for the Indigenous women and all of their families and loved ones, because someone needs to be on the front line. And, you know, those of us that are not in the government, sometimes it can feel like we're so far apart from the solution, and it's like, what can be done? And it's so frustrating. Like, I know in my experience, it's so frustrating. You just want to go in there and, you know, fix things. And so I so appreciate connecting with you, Kim, and I look forward to, you know, building our relationship and working together more and seeing what we can do on the side of the border. And I so appreciate you coming on and being a part of Day of Empathy.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you again for organizing it. And thank you for having me. And I'm coming to all of you, I should have said at the beginning, from the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, otherwise known to many of you as Ottawa. So take good care, and I hope everybody stays safe and is healthy.
Yes, you as well. Thank you so much, Kim.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye. All right, so we are going to bring on Greg McGinnis. So Greg, if you are there still, which I think you are, Erin, if you can bring him on. I know we're a few minutes over. Greg, thank you for your patience. I'm just gonna, shoot, I just remembered, oh my gosh, I just remembered there was a couple of questions I was supposed to ask in here. I was so keen on that. I'll follow up with, there was a question from Justice Law and Chuck Basty. Erin, are you there? Are we still on? There was a couple of questions on Facebook. So I will ask him directly and get those answers. And I'm just reading here.
Amy, I actually had a question.
Yeah, I just noticed that was for Kim. I'm so sorry, Amy. I was looking at the time and I was like, oh my gosh, we're over time. And I was concerned about that. I totally forgot about the questions. I'm so sorry about that. Amy, I will pass that question on to Kim directly and let you know what she answers with.
And we're just waiting for Greg to rejoin. He may have stepped away from his computer, so.
And Erin, if you could, I'm gonna do one more bathroom run really quick. Be right back.
Sounds great.
Okay. Kira was like, I don't need a bathroom break. I can do this the whole time.
Coffee catches.
What's that?
The coffee catches up with you.
Oh yeah, I'm not a coffee drinker, but I have some peppermint essential oil. And if you put it in your palm, Karen and Angela, if she's still on, she knows about this. But if you put this in your palm and rub it and then like suck it in, it goes right through your chest and wakes you up.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's called what oil?
Peppermint.
All right. Say that because I drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah, and can't do coffee. Okay, so I guess we're still waiting for Greg. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That was an awesome interview with Senator Kim Pate.
It was very good. And were you saying that she's kind of known as one of the, if not kind of the top person pushing reform in Canada? Yeah,
it doesn't sound like I mean, it's not a popular thing like where everyone's like, yeah, let's make some changes here. So I would think it's really great to have her come on and speak on that and be at the forefront of this.
Very good. Yeah, it would be great to follow up with her and just kind of figure out, what she needs. I know Jessica Jackson in one of the other sessions with Van Jones was encouraging people to contact governors and senators and congressmen and women in the states, mainly to push the safer reform initiatives that they've put out to kind of help make jails and prisons in the U.S. a little bit safer during COVID-19. And so I was wondering kind of what the ask would be in the Canadian government right now.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing Greg's thing on here. Do you see?
Hold on. Let me switch him over again. Promote to panelist. Oh, he said he's back here. There we go. Well, yeah, there we go.
Greg is back.
There we go.
Hey, Greg.
You're back. Nice to see you a few hours later.
Yeah, good. Sorry about that. Some reason it was not wanting to connect, but
All good. All good. Have you been tuning in throughout the day?
I have. Thank you. You've had some great guests. It's fabulous. And Senator Pate was very informative and obviously really plugged into the issue. So that was good to hear that what the government's trying to do. And
Yes. Oh, yeah, for sure. That was refreshing to hear. I think for all of us, like on this side, how often do we get to speak to someone up there directly and just, hear like, what are you doing in this side? Like, we're passionate about this. What are you doing? So it was really great. So Greg, I appreciate you being on the last interviewee before our break. Time is flying. Oh my gosh. And so Greg McGinnis is a director of chaplaincy for the Salvation Army's Correctional and Justice. I can't remember your exact title.
yeah, Correctional and Justice Services.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So I appreciate you being on and I want to hear about, well, like, let's start. How did you even get into the role that you're at? Because you must have some kind of backstory.
Well, it's as I've looked back at it over the years, it's a bit of a lifelong family journey, to be honest. I have an economics degree from university and worked in financial management. Coming out of university, that was what I thought that I wanted to do. And after doing that for a few years, I really realized that I didn't really want to look after other people's money for the rest of my life, and I wanted to do something of greater impact. I had a chance in my 20s to spend some time down in Costa Rica, both doing some building mission, and then I went back for 6 months and did the accounting at the same alcohol rehab center that I had visited previously. And those sort of things started to change where I was headed. I had a job as a crime scene victim assistance program coordinator that the Salvation Army partnered with the Toronto Police. And so I was exposed to that part of the world, offering assistance to victims. We would do immediate response when the police would phone and dispatch some trained volunteers to provide assistance for people. So that introduced me to that piece of the world. And later on, I ultimately became a Toronto Police chaplain, actually, for 11 years. So moving from victim assistance to police officer assistance, and then now into people who have conflict with the law and sort of helping that side. But as I look back to my history, my grandparents were chaplains in correctional and justice services. And actually that painting back there was a gift by an inmate to my grandparents. Apparently my cousin was telling me that when she came to visit me, she said, "Oh, you have the fall one. I have the winter one." And I didn't know that the family has a few of them.
Wow.
So there's a bit of a family heritage in it as well. But I have done a variety of things with the Salvation Army. I've pastored churches. I've been in youth and camping, adult education. But since 2011 was in correctional and justice services. So I was the on-site chaplain at the criminal court at College Park at Yonge and College in Toronto. And that was really my introduction to what I'm currently doing, now serving as the director of chaplains and supporting a large group of chaplains in the South Central region of Ontario.
And are you, like, you and your team, because I know the Salvation Army is so big, your presence is so wide throughout North America. Are you specifically working with people who are inside right now, post-release? Like, where are they in in the whole process?
From court and institutional work, and we do have some residential work as well. So, I mean, we're kind of there from their bail hearing on. So they're first arrested. We're active. We can sometimes be the first person they see in Toronto, down in the holding cells at one of the criminal courts in Toronto, one of the 5 criminal courts. And our chaplains would be down there trying to help them connect with lawyers and sureties, and assuring them that if they're released, that they can come by through the day and they can get some further support, some referrals to community agencies. They can get a snack, they can get some travel assistance, or they can get a sweater. Or oftentimes, actually, the cells are always cold. They're usually below grade, and in the summer, the AC all settles down in the basement. So if you get arrested in the summer, you're not really prepared to sit on steel benches and shiver in the cold. So we often, actually, that's often our first encounter, is simply trying to provide a little bit of comfort for them, and actually by doing that, reduce their level of stress and anxiety, and that makes life a lot better for everybody in the holding cells. The other folk who are arrested awaiting appearance in court, but also the court officers themselves, they really appreciate us coming down there and de-escalating and reducing stress and making their job easier, and less conflict in the bullpen when people are waiting to go to court. So right at the very front end, we're actually there, and then we can make a referral to our own chaplain or the other chaplains in institutions if people are detained. And when they're released, we have parole residences in Toronto. We have 4 residences in Toronto, and a youth open and secure custody facilities out in the west end of Toronto. So we have a fair bit of activity really on the go.
Very cool. And you touched on, you answered my question. Maybe if you can expand on this. Do you find that people like the correctional officers and other staff that you come encounter with, that they do appreciate you there, or is there any kind of like annoyance or resistance to what you guys are doing?
You know, the Salvation Army's been doing this so long. We are really well appreciated. I know guys inside will tell us that you know, we're among the most appreciated in institutions. And often if anybody in a range creates enough difficulty that gets the Salvation Army withdrawn from their range, they have the other guys to answer to for that, because they usually know when we're there that we're doing something helpful for them, so they appreciate that. We do some creative things, like at Christmas we do our sunshine bags. So we take some you know, candy cane and some chocolate bars or energy bars in a bag, and distribute those at Christmas time.
Nice.
To the inmates, to know that you know, I always try to remember they're all getting released. So the choice for us is how do we want them to arrive, because they're being released and they're gonna live in a house near you. So here's your choice: to either spend some time investing in their a life change, and with some programming and chaplaincy services and those kinds of programs, so that they get a fresh start. Or do you want them to, like some people say, you know, you throw away the key. They say, you know, they shouldn't get any benefits and no programs. But you know, then they don't arrive out in the community ready to contribute, and to change their life. So it's an important time. Unfortunately, the provincial institutions don't often have a lot of programming. So the federal institutions much more opportunity, but provincial, by the time they do 3 meals a day, it's hard to get even one-on-ones and programming done. So, you know, we do have some, Salvation Army has some staff and some institutions that we do our best to try to meet that programming need.
And is the lack of programming in the provincial level because of like staff saying, no, you can't have this program in here? Like, what's contributing to that? There's a lot of different reasons. You know, there's a lot of reasons why things get locked down. You know, currently in the institutions, they're pretty much locked down from 7 to 7 anyway. But through the day, if there's some kind of altercation, or they find something and they've got to shut down a certain range,
or they're short staffed for illness, or there's not enough supervisors around. Yeah, there's unfortunately a lot of challenges around having people available to move the inmates into program rooms, or for programs or chapels, or that kind of activity.
Yeah, go ahead.
We try to support the officers as well. Like, we do a staff appreciation at Central East and Central North Correctional Centers. So we do a donut and coffee day, and give out our calendars, which we've been giving out for 20 or 30 years. Some of them have worked there that long, and they have every one of them. We have sort of little annual pocket calendars for them to keep their schedule in for their shifts. So we do have an eye on the staff as well, and that's really part of our mandate, is that our self appointed mandate is not just for inmates, it's for the staff as well. And we want to make sure that they are cared for as much as we're able. There's a lot of them. There's usually only one of us, so we are greatly outnumbered. But we do have our eye on that ball, in the sense that there's a lot of stress for them as well. And if they can have an opportunity to sort of deal with some of that and release some of that in a helpful way, they better manage the inmates. So looking after them really is a way to look after the inmates.
Yeah, showing appreciation, right? And we talked about this, like, everyone wants to be acknowledged, and just like, okay, we get you and we appreciate you, and it makes a difference, you know, and then that trickles downwards. So I think it's great that you guys do something for the staff as well. What is some of your biggest, or maybe we could pick one, what's your biggest frustration that you see working inside? Like, what's the biggest thing that frustrates you?
Well, I think lack of programming. I mean, the provincial government recently had a 3-year Transforming Corrections initiative. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not.
No.
That just wrapped up, was it a year or two ago now? But it was a very exhaustive examination of how to do corrections better. And the big result was the reduction of a limit on segregation. The community agencies, as a community agency, I don't know that we felt that we got as much traction out of that. We had really hoped that more would be downloaded to community agencies, and that there would be more people released to community agencies that didn't need to be in custody. You know, they say it's $100,000 to keep someone in custody for a year, and I've also heard that contrasted with it's $10,000 to educate a student when they're a child. But it costs $100,000 if you don't do a good job in the education piece. You got to pay for it at the other end. So it's very cost effective to really invest in young people, and the younger the better.
Sure. Yeah, and invest in programming in general, right? Like, talking about trying to save money, but if they're being released, like, there's such a high turnover in some of these facilities, and if they're being released with no support or no transformation, and they come back in, it's like, okay, well, we're just spending more money and more money and more money.
And there is a pre-release planning for inmates that are going to be released, and somebody's dedicated in the institution to do that. And that is an important role. Housing is huge. And employment is another huge hurdle for them to overcome. And the other one is, if you or I were away for a long time from all of our